They taught us to love routine because routine keeps the mountains honest. Late season patrols mean the day crowd's thin. The wind comes down off the ridges with a different decision in it, and the gravel lots fill with the kind of quiet that carries farther than voices. I signed out Unit 24 at 17:05, checked the first aid kit by the passenger footwell, shook the Maglite to feel the batteries behave, and fanned the stack of permit tags clipped to my visor. The radio gave me the park tone, and then dispatch on Channel 2, clear tonight. A front was inching through the strait. The forecast said light rain after midnight, freezing level around 4,000, gusts to 20 on the passes. I drew a slow line on the trail map from the South Loop kiosk to Willow Notch and back, penciling estimated times like a budget. The ranger lot sits under alder and maple, and this late in the year the leaves land with that dry paper confidence. I wrote in the field notebook before the first turn out of the yard. 1711, Unit 24, Fuel 34, South Loop Patrol. Kiosk receipts, fire ring checks at Willow and Cedar Flats. Bear boxes, verify shut. Trail register, photograph last page. Weather, 49 degree knit shop, barometer 29.92, steady. The first piece of wrongness was small enough to carry like lint. The after-hours line rang on the second switchback, the little green icon on the dash cell blinking against the dusk. That phone isn't for casual calls. It's the number on the fee envelopes and the campground kiosk. I thumbed the hands-free, and the truck speakers gave me a soft, flat wind. "Park Ranger," I said. "Go ahead." Nothing. Then a wet sound, as if the microphone wanted to clear its throat, and the faint hush you can hear in timber when rain is thinking about it. "Park Ranger," I repeated. "If you're at a payphone or with bad service, just say where you are and what you see." A voice walked into the cabin like it had taken off its shoes first. "Is someone there?" It was close but not clean, like an old recording played back over a newer one. Not panic, not drunk. Something about the vowels, local, or someone who had learned to sound like it. "I'm here," I said. "Where are you calling from?" Static laid a thin blanket over the words. "Lot. The lot. Ranger, it's after..." Then the line clicked once, softly, the way a padlock answers its hasp, and the call ended. The dashboard told me the number was unknown. The after-hours log said we don't return unknown. We proceed to the nearest plausible. Nearest plausible was the South Loop trailhead lot, 2 miles ahead, beyond the Cedar Flats where the ground holds its breath. The evening thinned into that late-season gray that isn't quite dark and isn't quite anything else. I pulled into the lot at 1727 and took the beam across the cars. 4 sedans, 1 pickup with a dog blanket, all with valid tags under the windshield clips. The kiosk light hummed. The map under plexiglass carried the small moons of fingerprints from a long summer. Procedural texture keeps fear in the right drawer. I walked the line of vehicles, fingertip on hoods for residual heat, eyes on dash for fee envelopes. I called it out as I went, because hearing the list makes the list real. Subaru, warm. Toyota, cool. Ford, dog blanket, still damp. Jeep, warm. Honda, cold. A crow counted me from the Douglas fir at the lot's edge. 3 calls and then a silence that felt like an answer. The kiosk register had 3 entries after noon. I photographed the page and then copied the times into the field notebook. 12:48, Torres Party, Willow Notch, 113:16, M, Solo, Cedar Flats only, 13:40, Roberts Quinn, Overlook Spur, no return times noted. The park radio murmured on my shoulder. The repeater gave a brief ghost of my own voice from earlier check-in, as if it had stored the words and decided to spend them again. Repeaters can do that when someone else keys at the same moment, but the channel looked clear. I made a note. Breadcrumbs don't argue, they wait. I took the Maglite and the small trail map from the dash and started on the path past the salal and sword fern. At 1739, the first bridge groaned once under my weight, just one board near the far sill talking to itself, and then settled. The Cedar Flats held a clean inland smell, duff and rain promise. But when the wind slid under the canopy, I caught a salt edge that didn't belong 40 miles from tidewater. You can get an ocean scent far inland when a system lines up right, but the wind was out of the east. I stopped, waited for it again, and got nothing but wet bark and faint wood smoke from the campground across the creek. I wrote it down anyway. 1743, salt smell on east wind, one time only, Cedar Flats. Evidence wants company. At the second boardwalk run, just as the ground turns spongy and the skunk cabbage stands like folded flags this late in the year, I found prints in the thin film of leaf mush, fresh enough that the edges hadn't drunk any water yet, not boots. Bare feet, adult size, heel to toe clean, no slide, no hesitation, angling off the planks where any sensible person would stay on them. My own boot tread looked like a confession beside them. I turned the Maglite down low and took one picture centered on the third board from the end, with the little 2.1 mi trail marker in frame, the way we're taught, so no one has to guess scale later. Temperature pocket. When I bent close to the boards, the air on my cheek felt colder than my breath by more than the creek could explain. I spoke it into the recorder on my phone for good measure. 1752, Boardwalk 2, bare prints, adult, heading west into off-limits wetland. Air feels colder at surface by, guessing, 5 degrees. I radioed it in. Dispatch, Ranger 12. Go ahead 12. Boardwalk 2 on South Loop. Possible barefoot hiker, off trail into flats. No distress signs. Will investigate by visual only. No entry into sensitive area. Copy? Copy. Advise if you need another unit. Will do. The channel clicked once after I let up on the mic, faint and separate from the repeater's courtesy beep. Like someone else in the county leaned on their transmit and thought better of it. I walked to Cedar Flats proper and stood where the big tree holds the ground in a fist. The old western red cedar there is banded with lightning scar. The sign says so in a paragraph that's been photographed more times than most weddings. The forest kept the sound of my breath as if it might want to play it back later. I swept the beam low and found the prints again where the duff turned to mirror. They were still right, clean, then a gap, as if the walker had stepped from one fir root to another without touching the black between. Not impossible, just not how people move when it's cold and the light is going. I made choices like a ranger and not like a story wants. I didn't step off the boardwalk. I flagged the line with 2 strips of blue tape at eye level so a second unit wouldn't walk past it in the dark. And I wrote the location like a ledger note. Cedar Flats, barefoot tracks, angle off near lightning scar cedar, 11 paces west of signpost. No voice contact, no light observed. On the way back to the lot, the smell came again, but upside down. Wet metal, like the inside of a bottle left in rain, and then the sweetness of crushed fern where no one had just walked. The radio gave me a whisper of weather, NOAA text-to-speech about small craft advisory extending to 0400, and then an extra syllable after the timestamp that didn't belong to any alphabet I know. I stopped walking, and the trees stopped too, as if they had been keeping pace to be polite. Back at the truck, the after-hours line had left a voicemail. I played it on speaker with the door open so the cabin and the lot would hear together. Wind, but the wrong kind again. The kind recorded inside a jacket, too close to mic. "Is someone there?" the voice asked, the same shape as before, and then, "Ranger, I can see the lot. The light." The kiosk light hummed behind me. The message ended with the soft padlock sound. The call time was 17:24, 3 minutes before I had arrived. The routine asks for a second pass when the first one finds anything. I drove the loop to Willow and checked the fire rings with the back of my knuckles. Everyone had drowned their coals right. A family played cards by headlamp and offered me hot chocolate. I declined and asked if they'd seen anyone barefoot. They laughed gently and said no. The dog in the Ford had lain down with its nose between its front paws and watched me as if I owed it something. At 19:06, I parked again at the South Loop lot and sat with the radio turned down low enough that I could hear the crow if it came back. I clicked the Maglite off and let my eyes decide. The kiosk light pooled and frayed at its edge where the lot gravel begins. A cold stripe threaded from the map board to the first trail post, the kind of narrow, chilled air that rides creek bottoms long after sunset. But the creek was 100 yards upslope. I got out and walked through it, felt the clean cut across my shins, and then stepped back and felt it again. Not wind, a line. I put a permit tag on the post because it was what I had in my hand, and wrote in the notebook that I had done it, because the book is what keeps the mind from writing something else. "Dispatch," I said, keying up without turning the volume. "Ranger 12, I'll be on foot, quarter-mile on South Loop. Checking for overdue solo hiker, possible barefoot. I'll keep it to the trail." "Copy 12, dispatch said. "Be advised, no reports of overdue in that area. Do you want a second?" "Negative for now, I'll advise." I let off the mic. The courtesy beep came. Then another click, like the answer to a question I hadn't asked, and a voice the radio shouldn't carry unless someone pushes the button. My own call sign, but out of my mouth by a half second and quieter, as if someone standing next to me had practiced being me for a while. It said what I had just said, up to the word hiker, and then it stopped. I stood with the field notebook open and the pen against the margin so the ink could feel useful. The kiosk light hummed. Somewhere under the Cedar Flats, a board remembered the weight it had held and gave a delayed sigh, one board length from where I had crossed. I wrote one more line because routine is a rope. 1911. Radio echo of self. Second click after transmit. Cold stripe from kiosk to trail post. After hours voicemail time stamped before arrival. Barefoot tracks, likely adult. No distress. Then I turned the Maglite back on. Not because of fear, but because light is a tool you can hold, and took the trail while the last of the day counted me off under the trees. Cedar Flats after full dark is a study in what the forest keeps and what it returns. The boardwalk took my weight the way a ledger takes ink, without opinion, but permanently. I kept my light low to preserve the night's shape and let the radio ride my left shoulder, squelch set just high enough to make useless whispers pay a toll. Procedure first. I marked a clean starting point at the kiosk. 1914, lat long off the GPS snap. 47 degrees by 123 degrees, approximate. Barometer still steady, air 46 degrees. I tore a permit tag from the visor clip and looped it on the first trail post, so a second unit could count distance at a glance if they came behind me. The field notebook fit against the steering wheel as a desk while I wrote. Only then did I shoulder the pack and take the Maglite in my right hand the way we're taught. Beam low, thumb ready, wrist loose. The cold stripe had not moved. It ran from the kiosk directly to the first post, like a line you'd draw with a taut cord. I stepped across it and felt the temperature drop at shin height again. Like standing at a freezer door, someone won't close. At the second post, the air evened out. I made a second tag looped high, a breadcrumb for myself. The trail took me in. Past the alder stand, I let the radio know. 1922, Ranger 12 at Boardwalk 1, proceeding to Cedar Flats, single unit. I got the courtesy beep and then, habit now, I listened for the extra click. It came, half a breath later, a polite second hinge setting itself. No voice wrote it this time. I put that in the margins. Boardwalk 1 answered me honestly. No talk from the planks, just the creek below doing small math in the dark. Boardwalk 2 remembered me. The prints were where I'd left them, only the edges had begun to gloss in the night damp. I put the beam oblique and took a second photo with a little 2.1 mi marker again, then added a card from my wallet and frame for scale. I don't enjoy writing barefoot adult size when the thermometer says 40-something and dropping. I try to call out, the standard one, Park Ranger. If you're off trail and can hear my voice, come to my light. I won't ticket you tonight. I just want you out safe. The trees took it and practiced the sentence once, soft, somewhere beyond the big cedar. Nothing answered that came with lungs. The lightning scar cedar wore its damage like old uniform stripes. Its basal flare made a pocket of ground to the west that never quite dries, even in August. The sign about the strike had collected summer's fingernails and now wore a skin of damp. I stood there at 1935 with the beam off and watched the darkness set up its table, one bright kiosk seed far behind, the thread of darker air across the trail like a drawn line, the fine noise of my own coat as I shifted weight. Look long enough and the eye starts doing work the ear used to. That's when I saw it, a second set of bare prints. Not adjacent, not trampling the first. Parallel, but offset left by a hand span, as if someone walked beside the first walker, but spent their feet not quite in time. Smaller, not by much. The stride matched. No drag, no toe splay. I dropped to a knee, palm hovering just above them, and the air, again, felt colder near the surface than at my mouth, like river air that had forgotten its river. I set 2 stakes of blue tape on the boardwalk rail to bracket where the parallel tracks first appeared and keyed the radio. Dispatch 12, go ahead. Cedar Flats, confirming barefoot tracks, adult, now observing a parallel set. Same direction, offset left. I am not leaving the boardwalk. Request you note for the morning crew. I'll sweep to the Overlook turn and back. Copy 12, no other units in your area. Use caution. Across the channel, someone keyed a mic and then let it up. A third click. I could have pretended it was weather. I didn't. Under the cedar, there's a habit of echo you learn your first season. Sounds delay by a heartbeat, one and, when the creek runs fuller than you think it does. I walked, counting steps out of habit, and the plank behind me sighed a step late. It did it twice more, not consistent enough to be wood memory, not inconsistent enough to be a joke. I turned and set the beam on the boards. Nothing moved, no animal eyes. My hand had found the trail map in my chest pocket without asking permission, as if paper could speak to planks in a language they respected. At the Overlook junction, the small wooden arrow pointed right. I took its picture because later I would not trust where I'd found it. On the South Loop map, that spur is 0.3 miles. On my legs, buds, it is 10 minutes of careful steps if the planks are slick and your light is behaving. I gave myself 12. At 8, the radio's weather robot read out an update about the front arriving earlier than expected. Small craft advisory extended to 0300, and then added a single syllable that sounded like a vowel dragged across gravel. The NOAA bot can't do that. It doesn't improvise. I stopped and wrote the time. Midway up the spur, smell rearranged itself. Not salt this time. A sweetness like fern bruised under rain, and a metal breath like wet coin. Both at once and both wrong together. Somebody's headlamp pulsed ahead through the firs, quick, then gone, as if a person had moved their hand in front of the lens. I called out again and named myself and the lack of tickets. Silence came back with a temperature, cooler now across my shoulders, not my legs. At the Overlook deck, the forest gave me back the clearing, and the sound of water doing its own business far below. The Overlook faces a slot of gorge where the creek cuts tight and speaks louder than it should. The railing boards are stamped with last year's replacement date. I checked them like a person who needed something to hold. A single permit tag hung off one screw, split by weather. I hadn't put it there. I photographed it and then took it off because tags that don't belong become stories, and I don't like the wrong kind of story. I stood still for 1 full minute by my watch. Footfalls resolve when you give them your time. I heard 3 sets in that minute. Mine settling out of my boots, 1 delayed bored sigh, polite as a throat clear, and 1 soft, steady cadence somewhere in the direction of the cedar, not on wood, but not in mud either, as if someone paced the boundary where planks quit. I keyed up. Dispatch 12 at Overlook deck. No subjects visible. Observing anomalous audio delays on boardwalk. Smells inconsistent with weather. I'll return to trailhead. Copy. Their voice had a shape like concern in it now. 12, be advised, we had an after-hours call again. Unknown number, caller stated they could see the lot light, time-stamped 1948. I turned to look through the trees toward that single kiosk glow I could not possibly see from the Overlook, and yet for a moment I let myself believe I could. Copy, I said, returning. On the way back, the Overlook spur asked for 10 minutes and took 7. I checked my watch twice and then my pace count, and didn't like the math. Spatial drift is a trick your brain plays when you're tired or afraid, or both. The field notebook doesn't let it get worse. I wrote the times in big figures, lit them with my beam, and read them aloud. 2312, left Overlook, 2319, junction. The boards behind me waited 2 heartbeats to complain, and then did it with emphasis, like something heavy had obeyed after a pause. Cedar Flats again. The prints had not smudged, but the parallel set ended without apology, mid-duff, left foot at half press, then nothing. As if a person had taken 1 long step onto a route and then decided not to be where they were. I am not the sort who keeps omens, but I put another pair of blue tape flags on the rail because I wanted the morning crew to stand where I stood and have to make a decision with their own light. The extra click on the radio began to feel like a person in the room clearing a place for their plate. Once, just before Boardwalk 2, it came before my courtesy beep, as if I had been answered in advance. I stepped to the side to let something pass that didn't, then felt foolish and stepped back. That's how you lose the thread. Not fear, but embarrassment. At the lot, the kiosk hummed its small, faithful hum. The cold stripe had widened to a ribbon you could see if you believed in seeing air. My first permit tag lay on the gravel under the post, ripped in a clean diagonal like paper cut with a good knife. No wind gust had that kind of aim. I crouched and touched the edge, dry. Whatever had torn it had done so before the dew settled. There were no footprints in the gravel toward or away. I sat in the truck with the dome light off and wrote with the pen's clip between my teeth when it skated. The heater fan on low made the glass begin to forgive the night. I called dispatch for a welfare check on my own judgment, the way you do when you've stayed with a pattern too long. 12 is clear of South Loop. No subject located. Bear prints documented. I recommend a morning sweep with resource team. I'll mark waypoints. Copy 12. Do you need another unit now? Negative. I looked at the torn tag in my palm. I'll swing past the campground once more, then return to shop. Copy. Be advised. After hours line just rang, no audio, then hung up. I put the truck in drive and stopped again, because the after hours phone in the dash lit without ringing. Unknown number. I let it time out to voicemail, because the guideline for unknown is still the guideline. The message arrived 10 seconds later. I didn't play it yet. I drove the loop past Willow, I counted tents, I let my eyes do the simple work. On the way back, just where the lot first shows through the trunks, the kiosk light blinked once. Not a power sag, but a deliberate blindfold and off motion, and then resumed. In the cab, with the truck idling, I pressed play. Wind first, but too close to mic again. Then a voice living exactly at the distance of my own windshield. Ranger? Is someone there? The sound of a board complaining came through next, one board length late. Then, smaller, as if someone stood next to the caller and admired their work. It's after. The message ended with the soft lock sound. I wrote, 2013, after hours, VM, unknown. Content matches earlier, includes delayed board sound, final word after. I checked the lot a last time. I placed a fresh permit tag on the first post and looped it twice. I locked the truck, unlocked it again because I thought I'd forgotten the notebook, found it in my hand, and laughed once, quietly, at my own routine trying to keep me. As I pulled out, the radio gave me my own voice back, half a second late and quieter, repeating the line I'd said an hour earlier. I'll be on foot. Then, silence. The crow didn't count me this time. I told the steering wheel what I tell the night when it starts bargaining. Maps are promises. We keep them or we don't. The wheel did not answer. The morning crew would bring straight edges and patience, but a pattern won't wait for daylight if it has decided you belong to it. I signed Unit 24 out again at 2140 after the briefing. Just me by request. The shop light made a small yellow geography on the concrete. I ran the checks because procedure isn't superstition, it's ballast. Maglite batteries swapped for fresh spare set in the right cargo pocket. Park radio on channel 2, squelch true. First aid kit counted. 2 fresh permit tags in the visor clip, a third tucked in the field notebook, as if paper could keep paper safe. I added a pocket thermometer to my shirt pocket. The map stayed folded to South Loop, the crease shiny with use. Barometer at the shop, 29.89 and falling. Air verdict, dispatch. Let me know the after-hours phone had been quiet for the past hour. No unknown since 2030, they said, like we were both talking about a neighbor who might come back at any time. I told them my plan. I'll run to the Overlook and install a loaner trail cam. Just the deck, not the flats. I'll set it for interval and motion, low IR. If we get someone pacing board edges, we might catch an exposure. Copy 12, weather shows light rain by midnight. Copy, I'll keep time notes. The lot at South Loop sat like it knew its lines by heart. Same 5 cars, 2 cooler than before, 3 still warm. The kiosk hummed, steady. The cold stripe from the map board to the first post was wider now, calf to knee. I remembered the torn tag and checked the base of the post. Clean gravel, no paper. I looped a new tag, not because it meant anything, but because the hand wants to tie something in place when the mind can't. The knot sat too neatly. I redid it sloppier, a human signature. Field notebook, 2158, arrive South Loop, air 43 DGF, bar 2987 falling. The source falling. Cold Ramauer. These sin Bamwisi style Darji be presented Tistamandi. Chinvadis wide order. Kiosk light steady. Permit tag applied to post 1. No audible voices. After hours phone idle. Boardwalk. One told me the creek was up a notch. Its arithmetic carried farther into the alders. At Boardwalk 2, I found the old prints muted by damp. Their edges softened to an idea of feet rather than proof. The parallel set still ended mid-duff as before. I bracketed them with fresh blue tape even though I had done that already. Breadcrumb within breadcrumb, a little redundancy against the way memory softens at 3 a.m. The lightning scar cedar lived with the same confidence. Bark planks like armor, root flare black as good soil. The smell in the flats had shifted, fern bruised again, but now a thread of wood smoke I couldn't source, as if a single match had been struck and then thought better of itself. Metal breath faded to a suggestion. I took the Overlook spur and set the pace like a metronome. One count every other board, breath on the fourth. Watch face glowed without apology when I tilted it. Halfway, I stopped and let the forest put its music back together around me. A board sighed behind me 2 counts late. The radio, on my left shoulder, gave me the NOAA voice and then pinched off mid-sentence like a gloved hand had covered a mouth. The courtesy beep arrived with a neighbor. The double click that now felt less like a technical artifact and more like a person who liked to sit beside a radio and press a button at the same time I did. I smiled at the feeling, only to keep it from becoming something else. At the Overlook, the deck boards held the day's last heat, like a book holds afternoon sun. The drop below took the creek out of sight and turned it into voice. The deck rail wore last year's stamp, 1024. I photographed that again, then unpacked the loaner trail camera, county surplus, low glow IR, timestamp burned into frames. I mounted it on the northeast post, pointed west into the spur corridor so it would see whoever approached or left, including me. Settings. Photo every 15 seconds on interval, regardless of motion. Motion sensitivity medium, time sync to watch at 22:13. I wrote the serial number in the notebook and tightened the strap until the bracket didn't complain. The deck light, really just the sky being generous, thinned as the front slid closer. I let the Maglite rest on the rail, beam tipped down so the lens caught a soft ring of its own. The ring dimmed and brightened once, slow, the way a person would roll a dimmer knob to test a filament. My thumb was off the switch. The light had not flickered. The beam was steady on the boards. It was the world around the light that had taken a breath. I told myself a cloud had thickened over the exact shape of my beam, and then let that answer go because it asked for too much belief. Document insert, for the record, 22 SUS, Overlook deck, installed trail cam. Mode, INTV MOT IR low, serial WO7134. Time sync 2233 bar. Note, ambient light perceived to dim, 1-2 seconds without Maglite flicker, possible cloud, creek volume steady, no other lighting seen. I took the spur back slow, counting boards aloud. 1, 2, 3, 58 to the junction, same as my day count. But the watch read 23 at the deck, and 26 at the junction, and for the way I walked, it should have been closer to 8 minutes than 3. I stopped, set the pack down, and did the thing that saves arguments later, a quick compass orientation. North on the map is north on the needle. My headlamp for scale lay on the rail where I could find it with the beam. The red needle did not wander. I wrote that it didn't, so I could not accuse it later. The space had shortened, not the needle. Back at Cedar Flats, I went to the rail where I had flagged the print end and froze my breath to listen. The flats did not answer. The boardwalk, though, kept its chosen game. 1 delayed sigh 2 boards behind my last footfall. When I stepped backward without warning, as if to catch someone, nothing landed on the board that should have borne it. When I stepped forward again, the sigh came late. I'm not a man who announces ideas to the dark, but I did hear myself say, "All right," as if to an apprentice learning the radio. I took one more smell for the ledger. The smoke thread was gone. Fern and wet wood remained, clean. A second thread came through once, a cold metallic tang that did not belong to coin or blood or anything I own a word for, and then it resolved back into nothing. At Boardwalk 2, I checked my tape flags. The wind had worried one at the corner, tugging it into a loose loop. The knot was still square, my hands from earlier. Below the rail, something white caught the beam in the duff. I reached with the Maglite, not my fingers, and moved the fern. My torn permit tag sat there, the one the lot post shouldn't have let go of earlier in the evening. The diagonal tear matched. The handwritten note, my own block letters, read Post 1 in blue ink. It was dry, in a place that should stay damp all night. I took a picture, then slid it into the front pocket of the notebook, like a pressed leaf I didn't want to keep, but couldn't throw away yet. Radio fragment, 2239. 12 dispatch. Go ahead. We're getting a second caller on the after hours line. Same unknown. They hung up. Then a third. Child on the line? Hard to tell. No words. Then silence. Copy, I said. I'm returning to the lot to monitor. I didn't say I wanted walls and a windshield. I didn't say anything about children. The content filters in the back of my mind are not laws of physics, but I hold them like laws anyway. The lot presented itself like a photograph, with the brightness turned down one notch. The kiosk light was still on, but its circle seemed smaller. The cold stripe had fattened to a ribbon as wide as a curb. When I stepped through it, my knee felt like it had walked into shallow water. I held the Maglite inches above the gravel at the stripe's edge and saw nothing special. Same small stones, same cigarette filter someone had ground in with a heel in September, same dark flecks where rain had first practiced and then forgotten. I put the pocket thermometer at ankle height in the stripe and at the same height off the stripe. Readings: stripe 39 degrees, outside 43 degrees. 4 degrees is a number you can keep. It's not a ghost. I got into the cab and left the door open for the radio's sake. The after-hours phone lit. Unknown. I let it go to voicemail because we don't feed that loop. The message posted, and dispatch told me another had arrived on their line, then a hang-up. I played mine. Board groaned first, 2 boards back from where my truck sat. Then wind that felt too near. Then the voice with its odd, careful vowels. Ranger, the light. It's smaller, and is someone there? The voicemail ended with the same quiet lock sound. The timestamp said 22:46. I wrote it down. When I looked up, the kiosk's circle felt normal again, like someone had let go of the dimmer. I tried the trailside experiment that had bothered me since the Overlook. Distance versus time. I set the watch at 22:50 bor, walked to post 2 in a slow, even pace, counted boards, 64, because the first stretch runs longer. Time, 22:54:10. On the way back, same pace, same count. Time, 2255:08. The return took 58 seconds fewer steps than the outward leg suggested. I did the math twice like a student who doesn't trust the answer. Both times, the night smiled and held its counsel. I keyed dispatch. 12. I've set a camera at the Overlook to watch the spur. I'm getting consistent temperature difference along a straight line from kiosk to post 1. Perceived dimming of kiosk light occurred once. Instrument readings were normal immediately afterward. I'm going to sit on the lot 10 minutes to listen, then clear. Copy 12. We'll log the camera. No further after-hours calls in the last 3 minutes. Behind their voice, faint, a third click. They either didn't hear it or chose not to mention it. For the 10 minutes I sat, I did the quiet work. Sharpened my pencil with the little brass sharpener I keep in the glove box. Refolded the map so the south loop lay flat. Wrote, "Remember to pull SD card," on my wrist in small letters. The dog in the Ford lifted its head once, looked past me at the kiosk with a kind of polite interest, then put its muzzle down again without sighing. The crow was asleep or had gone to another county. At 23:07, the radio repeated me from an hour ago, my own voice, trimmed short so it ended on, "I'll be on," and then quit as if someone had considered finishing the sentence and decided not to. I did not answer my ghost. I told dispatch I was clearing the lot. The cold stripe grazed my knee like a shallow ditch as I stepped through. The Maglite weighed exactly what it should. On the way out, I looked once in the mirror. The kiosk light sat square in its glass. The lot was a rectangle of gravel and remembered footsteps. The trees, black in their duty, leaned in the way they have leaned for decades. The only wrongness available to me was written down in a notebook in my lap. That's the sort of wrongness I can live with for one more night. I signed off with dispatch a mile down the road and told the steering wheel, as if it were a rookie I was training, the thing they taught me my first year: don't name it, document it. The wheel accepted the lesson. The front's first drops lined the windshield like a ledger. The front came in like a careful bookkeeper. Quiet columns of rain, no drama, everything accounted for. I turned Unit 24 back toward the South Loop at 16, not because I'd been ordered, but because the ledger in my lap had a line in it that wanted another line beneath. The shop yard had taken on that 2 a.m. acoustics where the sodium lamps sound like insects. I signed out the line tester kit, the little orange pouch we hardly use except when thunder takes a bite out of the repeater or the kiosk phone's sulk. I added a roll of fluorescent flagging to the visor clip, because the blue tape had started to feel like the only color the night could see. Maglite, trail map, pocket thermometer, permit tags, notebook. My hands knew their places. Dispatch answered on the second click. 12, confirm you're rolling again. Affirm. Purpose, line check. Repeater ping, lot kiosk light circuit, after hours phone self-test, then a quick pass to pull the Overlook camera SD if weather allows. Copy. We've had 2 more unknown calls. Dead air, times double stamped, 2249 and 2249. That's not us. Noted, I said. The park's phone vendor has its habits. Double stamps aren't one of them. Barometer at the shop door, 29.84 and falling. Air 41 degrees. Rain fine enough to feel like breath. The South Loop lot presented itself as if it had been told to sit still. 5 vehicles, hoods, shining like calm animals. Kiosk light on. Rain in the beam, no wind. The cold stripe had grown a shoulder, wider on the kiosk end, narrowing toward post 1 as if it had started to pour downhill and changed its mind. I set the pocket thermometer at ankle height again, on stripe and off stripe. 38 degree on, 42 DU off, 4 again. Numbers behave even when stories don't. I started with the repeater because radios make order out of the weather. Procedure, set handheld to channel 2, transmit a short tone from the lot, listen for the mountain to give it back. Park test, 1, 2, I sent, brevity per protocol. The courtesy beep came clear. A half second later, another courtesy beep, not belonging to any code book. Softer, as if it had traveled farther or didn't want to be heard. Dispatch 12. Receiving unexpected duplicate courtesy tone, post-transmit, low amplitude. Do you copy? Copy 12. We heard only the standard courtesy. No duplicate recorded. Understood. I wrote 0028. Repeater echo, audible local only. The line tester pouch yields a plug-in handset the color of a hunting vest. We use it to test the payphone style box inside the kiosk frame, the after hours line. I unlocked the access panel with the kiosk key and found the small cabinet dry, wiring neat. The phone module showed its green ready light. I clipped the butt set leads to tip and ring, press tone, and got dial tone steady as a river. I called dispatch from the tester, so we'd have something clean in the log. Dispatch, this is 12 on butt set from South Loop kiosk line. Reading you clear, they said. Caller ID shows kiosk. Timestamp 02033. I hung up and waited. The unknown calls never echo right away. They choose their own time. The tester has a little speaker for incoming rings. It stayed polite and quiet. I checked the message counter on the dash phone out of spite. One new voicemail from earlier, I didn't play it. Kiosk light circuit next. The lot's power service is simple. Panel in the kiosk base, 15 amp breaker for the light, a photocell on the roof. You can test the photocell by covering it, but you have to do it with a hand and not tape, since adhesive on a county fixture becomes a meeting later. I climbed the step, reached up, and cupped the sensor with my palm. The light brightened a hair, as if relieved to have a reason. When I took my hand away, it returned to its hum. I did it twice more to be sure I wasn't inventing dimming where none lived. Document insert, 00039, kiosk, breaker sound, firm, photocell functional, slight perceived breathe, in brightness when covered, wunk, likely normal response. No brownout indicated on panel. Rain fattened to coins. The cold stripe beaded differently than the gravel beyond it. The drop stood taller for a half second before they made up their minds to run. I flagged the stripe edges with 2 small links of fluorescent tape at shin height on post 1 and on the kiosk frame. Not because the night needed decoration, but because a second ranger at dawn should be able to find a thing without reading my mind. The radio gave me NOAA again. Frontal boundary passage 0200 0300, gusts 25, small craft advisory persists. Then the voice held its breath, half a syllable too long, like a speaker turned down by a careful hand, and finished the sentence in a tone different by a shade. Machines don't hesitate out of politeness. I wrote the time. Boardwalk 1 took my steps square. Boardwalk 2 remembered its game, my foot, then a late echo 2 boards back. I told it aloud, like a trainer, you do that again, I'll mark you. The board sighed on time next step, as if it had heard. I half smiled because I wanted my face to practice something besides frowning. Cedar Flats in rain smells like cedar, full stop, with a thin undertow of soil that knows its job. Tonight, a new note, cold iron, as if a gate stood nearby and had just been touched. The parallel barefoot tracks were still visible where the duff held them. Rain made their borders slur. The end point, left foot half press, then nothing, held. I walked the boardwalk margin slowly, leaning on the rail to ease a knee that had started to complain, and spotted one more half sign, a small combing in the moss beyond the reach of the splash. A trough that a hand could have made if a hand had been very patient and very cold. I photographed it with the scale card and did not call it anything in writing. The Overlook spur wanted caution in this rain. I took it anyway, because the camera would either have frames I needed or an empty card that would make a different kind of story. I measured time with the watch, with breath, with the old child's game of 1 and 2 and distance stayed distance. 60 boards to the junction, 58 to the deck. My legs said 8 minutes, the watch said 5:20. I set the pack down and waited, let the creek speak in its ledger voice. No headlamps, no whisper that arrived with lungs. Trail cam, still in place, strapped tight. The low-glow IR status LED blinked its slow, patient blink. I tilted the unit toward my beam and popped the latch. SD card dry. I swapped in a fresh one from the pouch and pocketed the original in a zip bag with the time written on the front. 01114. I held the old card up against my notebook, like a matchbook I intended to quit. On the deck, the Maglite did its ring again. Steady beam, but the world around it seemed to take a soft breath in and out once, as if light were something you could move through with your hands. Clouds thickened, then thinned. That answer was available. I let it stand in the ledger without making it carry anything more than it could. Radio fragment, 01117. Dispatch 12, pulled card from Overlook cam. Returning to lot to test kiosk line for incoming pattern. Copy 12. We'll stay on your channel. Unknowns have stopped for 12 minutes. The boardwalk delayed me at a new rhythm. The echo came a full 3 heartbeats late near the lightning scar cedar, then caught up 2 boards later as if embarrassed. I said nothing, and it said nothing back. The lot was again a rectangle of gravel and rules. My fluorescent flags held in the rain like small daybreaks. The stripes still read 4 degrees colder. I set the line tester to ring and called the after-hours line from the dash phone, then answered on the tester. My voice to my own ear, no mystery, just a loop for sanity. Then I waited without calling. 2 minutes. 3. The tester speaker stayed mute. When the dash phone finally lit by itself, I didn't answer because rules hold us when the ground doesn't. Voicemail caught it. I listened. Pen ready. Wind near mic. The delayed board groan. Then the voice. Careful vowels. Light. Like a person who didn't want to wake a sleeping house. Ranger, I can see the line. The word should have been light. It wasn't. The message ended with the padlock sound. I tried a different test. I keyed the radio and spoke the simplest sentence I could bear. This is Ranger 12 standing at the kiosk. I released the mic, waited for the courtesy beep. It came. A second later, my sentence returned thinner, without the last 2 words. This is Ranger 12 standing. Then silence, polite but final. I recorded in the book that the echo emitted at the kiosk. That is not a ghost. It is a subtraction. I took the SD card to the cab, shut the door to give the reins somewhere else to be, and used the county tablet with its stubborn card reader. The screen woke up with yesterday's map and today's rain. File directory, 00. Images at 2:16 start, interval 15 seconds, plus a handful of motion-triggered frames. I scrolled with the half-patient finger of a man who knows paper is better. The interval sequence showed the deck empty, my own arrival, my own hands, then the corridor of the spur, wet air made granular by IR. On one frame at 2:31, motion triggered with no subject visible. The IR had flashed on its slow pulse, pixel bloom around nothing. On another, 23:06, a short, thin vertical in the far right edge like the lens had met a straight edge not present in the frame before or after. At 23:07, the deckboard showed a darker stripe across 3 slats near the rail, the way wood looks when a palm rests there, then lifts. I didn't name it. I wrote the file numbers, times, and descriptions in the notebook and flagged those frames for export. I did not export them yet because I want the morning crew to see them fresh, without my voice on their backs. Rain drilled the roof. The Ford's dog turned a circle and settled, chin on Murs, patient with human experiments. I stepped back into the ribbon and let my knee remember shallow water. At its midpoint, the radio made a sound like a mic keyed and held without speech. 3 seconds, then release. I keyed up, because silence on a line makes me useful. Dispatch 12, I'm clearing South Loop. Repeater echo persists here only. Kiosk line tests to normal behavior. Voicemail content continues to reference lot. I've flagged a temperature differential physically and numerically. I hesitated. The content filters live in the back of the skull like a gentle chaperone. No subjects observed, no distress calls. Recommend resource and maintenance at first light. I'll remain on channel until shop. Copy 12. A pause, paper moving on their end. We'll put a ticket in for the line vendor about the double time stamps. Another pause that wasn't just paper. Be careful. I put the truck in gear and let the wheels find the road without hurrying them. In the mirror, the kiosk light kept its promise. The fluorescent flags reflected back the way small fish do. The stripe did not follow. The ledger on my lap had room for 3 more lines. I left them blank, on purpose, to prove I still could. Half a mile down, the repeater gave me my voice back again. I'll be on, and quit. I did not answer because I had nothing new to teach my echo. I drove with the map folded open beside me to a page I know by heart in case the night decided to ask me questions I could only answer with paper. The front pressed its seal on the windshield in long, even strokes, the wipers signing their names underneath. A system passed, and the park exhaled, the kind of afterfront quiet that makes asphalt look soft, and every sound ride farther than it should. I told dispatch I would stage at the South Loop lot one more time before first light. Not a sweep, I said. A listen. My tone made it sound like a request. It wasn't. Unit 24 knew the road by memory now. Barometer at the shop door, 2980 and still falling in the way numbers do after the rain has already had its say. Air 40 dig, nudging down. I added 2 things to the kit the way a person adds an extra sentence to a report they already filed. A roll of gaffer tape and a coil of surveyor's twine. The Maglite stayed where it wanted to live. The trail map went back to the South Loop fold. 2 fresh permit tags took their place under the visor. Field notebook, open on the passenger seat, blank lines waiting like a dare. The lot, at 02441, was a rectangle practicing stillness. Same 5 vehicles, beads of water rounding along their edges. The kiosk light hummed like a short thought someone had decided not to say out loud. The cold stripe lay from kiosk to post 1, broader near the kiosk, so the gravel took on a slight optical trick, as if the lot dipped there and didn't know it yet. I stepped into the ribbon and let the pocket thermometer tell me something I could hold. Stripe 37 dig, outside 41 dig, 4 again, the way an old habit keeps its promise. I keyed in. 12 at South Loop. I'll run a static for 15 minutes and then a controlled walk to Cedar Flats and back. If I go silent, set a 20-minute timer on me and ring my phone. Copy 12, timer set. The phrase controlled walk makes a thing gentler than it is. I set the truck to idle, left the driver's door cracked for the radio, and walked a small geometry. Kiosk to post 1 to the first bridge and back. Slow, measuring with steps and with time, and with that quiet that follows a front. I used the surveyor's twine and the gaffer tape to rig a quick and dirty indicator. 2 lengths of twine strung shin-high across the cold stripe, each with a permit tag folded over and taped at the midpoint. If air was going to move in a way that wasn't wind, maybe paper would tell me. Procedural texture keeps the mind from borrowing trouble. I took out the field notebook and drew the lot from above. Kiosk square here, post 1 there. 2 tag lines across the stripe with tick marks at 4 feet and 8. I labeled the tags A and B because letters are calmer than names. The Maglite beam let my pencil find the corners. When I looked up, the light hummed the way it had hummed all week. Listening is mostly deciding what you won't move. I stood with my left shoulder to the kiosk, the radio low. Creek sound, far, steady, no applause in it. A raven, not the crow, turned once somewhere over the alder and made a single remark about the state of things. My boot soles gave me back my own heartbeat. I noted all of it because a ledger full of trivial truths slides the fancy out of a night. At 0253, the radio popped a NOAA update and hesitated on the word mountains, like a singer looking for the note. I wrote, 0253, NOAA stutter, 1/2 beat, repeat normal. At 0256, a small thing happened in a small way. Tag A, the one closer to the kiosk, lifted through no more than 3 fingers height and settled, a slow up and down like a nod. Tag B did not move. No gust cuffed my pant leg. The lights pool made an honest circle, unchanged. I stepped into the stripe and let my knee find its familiar shallow water. The air smelled like cedar, then clean metal for 1 thin second. Coin, not coin, and then only rain clean duff again. I made myself write it flat. Tag A lifted 1 inch. No wind felt. Odor transient, metallic. A person has choices in a choose small moment. I didn't call it in. I walked the first bridge, then back, then to post 1 again, my beam low and patient. The board at 1.5 lengths behind me did its late sigh. Then a second sigh landed on 2 boards behind that, out of cycle, as if my echo had brought a friend. I stopped with my foot midair and held it, like pressing pause on a tape. The second sigh happened anyway, and then the first, backwards in time by a heartbeat. I felt the muscles at the base of my skull do that careful flex a laugh uses to pretend it wasn't a flinch. I stepped forward and let the sequence reset itself to honest. The Cedar Flats smelled like their name again. Rain makes cedar smell like a memory and not a fact. The old lightning scar tree kept its post. My blue flags drooped, saturated. The parallel barefoot track, where it ended mid-duff, showed a new detail I had missed, or which had not existed. A fine crossing of fern pinnae laid neatly over the half-press, each leaflet pointing toward the boardwalk, as if arranged by a hand with time and a preference for directions. I photographed it with the scale card and the lightning sign in frame, then wrote exactly those words because a later mind loves to soften edges. Technique 3. Document inserts calm suspicion. I gave myself a fragment right there against the rail at 0312. 0312, Cedar Flats. Rail, parallel bare track end unchanged, now overlaid with fern pinnae-oriented trailward. Not disturbance by shoe or animal apparent. Photos 1:18 to 1:21. Moisture bead on pinnae suggests placement after rain. The radio's courtesy beep, behind my shoulder, arrived with its steady friend. An extra click. Same polite timing as before. I didn't turn to look at a voice that was only a click, because standing up a noise into a person in your head is how a lot of things go wrong in a park. All the same, listening means you ask a question sometimes. I ask mine out of breath's edge, not out of bravery. If you're cold, I said toward the flats, come where the boards are. I won't write you for the off-trail. I'll walk you out. I kept my tone like a ranger who has had other nights with other people, and none of those people were a mystery. I waited exactly 30 seconds per my watch. The forest gave me back drop water from 2 different heights and 1 small footfall on plank a long board behind me that the boards themselves did not make. The Overlook spur wanted a decision. I left it for morning. Night listening breaks when you start cataloging, and a camera card at my elbow still held the frames I hadn't exported. I walked back to the lot, keeping my footfalls even, and counted my breaths just to have something human to count. Tag A was lying on the gravel when I got back. The gaffer tape still folded over it held a clean bend with grit stuck in the working surfaces, the way tools remember their last task. Tag B still hung at shin height, 1 edge damp darker, 1 edge dry. The twine they hung on was unbroken, both knots as I had tied them. I ran my fingers along Tag A's ribbon half, and the diagonal looked like a cut more than a tear, edges crisp. I checked the knives on my person by feel, as if I had a suspect. The knives where they should be, both shut. Dispatch, I said, because a ledger is 2-sided and the other side lives at a desk. 12 has a small field note. I set 2 permit tags as wind indicators across the cold stripe. After 10 minutes of calm, Tag A lifted and later was found on the gravel. No wind. No break in the line. Mark it for morning, not emergency. Copy 12. Paper moved on their end, then a softer sound like someone exhaled toward the mic and then away. Unknown calls stayed quiet for 25. We're on your timer. I reset their timer with my voice because each exchange is a boundary I can see. Reset 15. I took Tag A off the ground and stuck it in the notebook like a misprinted stamp, then restrung the line and hung a fresh tag from the visor under it for redundancy. You can hear a lot in a small park lot when you're not trying to hear a lot. At 0331, the kiosk's hum dipped and rose in a smooth 1-second wave without any dimming from the bulb. The radio keyed itself for 2 seconds, carrier only, then dropped. The creek lifted its pitch as if a rain pulse had reached it. My pocket thermometer read 36 degrees in the stripe now, 40 degrees off, still 4. That small honest number kept me. I wrote 4 so it would not turn into something else later in my mouth. I did one last controlled walk to the first bridge and back. Then a thing I hadn't done yet because it felt silly to do it in uniform. I stood in the stripe and closed my eyes. The park teaches you to use all the senses, not just the respectable ones. With eyes shut, the cold read not as cold, but as pressure, a thin hand at knee height moving past left to right, no higher than mid-shin, consistent, as if a creek had chosen to run along gravel and not downhill where gravity wanted it. When I stepped out of the stripe, the hand let go. I opened my eyes on the tail end of a headlamp pulse up trail, quick, gone, where there could not be a person without a car I'd counted. I did not chase it. I wrote light pulse 1 count, bearing Prudhig's likely reflection, so that tomorrow I couldn't tell the story bigger than it had earned. The after-hours phone lit one more time while I stood with my pen between teeth, signing the day's name at the corner of the page. I let it go to voicemail. The message took, and I played it through the truck speaker to let the lot hear, too. Wind close, a single board's complaint. Then the same careful vowels, nearer than before, no longer asking if someone was there, but a different line entirely, delivered like a person reading a note they didn't write. Park ranger, please remain where you can be seen. My own words, the earlier ones, but turned back to me with one change. Please. The message ended with the padlock click. We have orders and we have choices. Order said call for a second unit if a subject seems to be directing you. Choice said the subject might be nothing with lungs. I split the difference by making the lot more legible for the person I still claimed to be looking for. I hung 2 more tags along the stripe at knee height. I drew the lot again in the notebook, with those tags added. I moved Unit 24 3 feet so its headlamps faced square on the trail mouth, a curtain of honest halogen a person could walk toward. I keyed dispatches and told them I would remain visible at the kiosk until 0400. If I go silent, you call, I said, and I heard them nod through the radio. The night did what the title of this part says it did. It listened. Every small thing I did put a corresponding small weight in the air. When I tightened the Maglite bezel, the beam narrowed, and the kiosk hum thickened as if to match. When I tore tape for a new flag, the creek pitched up for 2 beats. When I turned the trail map 1/4 turn on the kiosk ledge, the extra courtesy click answered like a punctuation mark. I did not name anything. I wrote, and writing made it bearable. At 03:59, the Raven gave me one sound from the alder and flew off toward the river. The watch met 400 like a friend. I told dispatch I was clearing, left the tag strung, and placed the last permit tag in the center of the stripe on the gravel, face up, my block letters reading, Ranger here, because I needed one person to have said it to one other. Half a mile down the park road, the repeater gave me my voice back, the same phrase as before, thinner, ending on, I'll be on, and then nothing. I stayed with the wheel, and with the small clock numbers, and with the map folded open, as if paper could hold a night until morning chose to. I did not add conclusions to the notebook. I left space. Space is what the morning crew needs in a ledger if they're going to enter something of their own. Morning brought other hands and other radios. Resource and maintenance stood in a loose semicircle at the South Loop lot at 0910, drinking from paper cups and regarding the fluorescent flags as if they were a riddle with feelings. I briefed them before the day could add its own footnotes. Cold stripe holds about 4 degrees, kiosk to post 1, I said, tapping the field notebook. Parallel barefoot tracks ending mid-duff, Cedar Flats. Overlook camera pulled at 0114, frames with IR bloom, booma, and a palm dark on the rail. After hours voicemails continue referencing the lot. Radio, courtesy double, heard locally only. Recommend, non-invasive sweep, leave tags until dusk. They nodded in the way crews nod when nothing is broken, but something isn't right. Maintenance tested the kiosk photo cell with a gloved hand and called the response boringly normal. Resource photographed the fern pinnae I had logged and muttered, placed post-rain, the same as my note. We set a second loaner trail cam on a post aimed down the boardwalk towards Cedar Flats with timestamps synced to dispatch. Then the day took the lot for itself. Kids on balance bikes wobbling between puddles, a man tying new laces, a woman holding a folded map in 2 hands like a hymn. The cold stripe vanished in sun that never quite believed in itself. No strip of air sneak cold under shin height at noon. That felt like an accusation, and I accepted it. The plan for night was simple. Test distance against time with paper and GPS both, fix waypoints, try to break the story. I slept, wrote a basic supply order because paperwork behaves when other things don't, and signed Unit 24 out again at 1718 under a sky the color of a clean eraser. Barometer 29.78, falling in place. Air 42 degv. I added chalk to the kit, construction stick, bright, and a small spool of pin flags. I sharpened the pencil to a mean point and said out loud to the shop wall, "Map's the promise, we keep it," because saying it makes it harder not to. The lot had gained a sixth car, its hood still ticking. The kiosk light strained early against a cloud stack. The stripe returned as the day blinked and got smaller, not immediately, but with the temperature's patience. Pocket thermometer, 39 degrees on, 43 degrees off. 4. I logged the number and its repetition because repetition is law in a park. Procedure for the map test. Use one path you know with numbers. Impose more numbers. See who moves. I tied pin flags in pairs to my belt so I could set them one-handed at measured intervals. The trail map's south loop key says boardwalk spur to Overlook, 0.3 ME. My watch says 8 minutes if you don't dawdle, 10 if wet. GPS says 0.31 or 0.29 depending on canopy. We would ask all three tonight and see which one blinked. I keyed dispatch. 12 departing kiosk at 1802. Controlled post to Overlook spur junction, then deck. Dropping pin flags every 25 paces. Voice every 100. If I call silent, start a 20-minute. Copy 12. Timer's on. At the first post, I chalked a small cross at shin height and wrote 0 in a square, my own milepost where a person could see it and not think it graffiti. I set a pin flag at the boardwalk start and wrote 25 on its tab. The creek had come up from last night's rain and spoke with a fuller voice. I logged that so my head couldn't use the sound to soften other edges later. Boardwalk 1, plank count 72. I counted aloud on purpose in blocks of 25. 1 and 2 and... until my own rhythm became a thing I could hear separate from the boards. Boardwalk 2 remembered me in its way. Foot, then the late sigh 2 boards back, on the beat. I marked the rail at those places with chalk arrows pointing behind. Because if the boards wanted to keep score, I would too. Cedar Flats smelled like cedar and cold iron again, but the iron thread arrived at a different height. Last night it had been up around shoulders. Tonight it licked the back of my hands when I let them drift low near the rail. That's not weather. I chalked the rail, small tick at the height the smell took me, with 1831 next to it, and told myself wind stratification was a decent story to try first. The fern pinnae lay where Resource had rephotographed them. No new arrangement. My blue flags hung harmless. The parallel barefoot track end looked the same to my eyes and different to my knees. I couldn't write that sentence, so I didn't. I wrote only, track end unchanged. Overlook spur junction at 1836 by watch. Pin flags at 50 paces and 125, tabs labeled. I read the GPS, 0.19 miles from kiosk to junction, which is shy of the 0.2 I often see. I tapped the unit, satellite strong, trees overhead, Douglas fir and hemlock, honest, no reason to scramble signals. I wrote .19 anyway, because writing refuses my permissions. I told dispatch, junction at 36, GPS reads 19, proceeding to deck. Then I set my pace to the kind of dull that makes a person trustworthy. 58 boards to the deck, same as my count last night. But the time landed wrong. Watch said 1839 when it should have said 1844 if you are the kind of ranger who goes slow on wet plank. The GPS showed .31 miles from kiosk to deck, which is right on the printed map, and the map suddenly felt like the only adult here. On the deck, the trail cam faced me with its little blank eye. I greeted it under my breath to save my throat for the job. The creek's voice down the slot ran slightly above key, as if water played to a different audience half the time. I put chalk on the rail where last night's darker stripe had marked a palm, wrote palm 2307, where a person anywhere could see it and argue. Then I set up a second experiment, twine stretched between 2 deck posts at knee height, just like the lot. Permit tag at center, ranger here in my block letters. If the deck had learned the lot's trick, the tag would show it. I took out the map and aligned it to the world, a ritual as old as the park. North at top, needle steady, edge of paper lined with a real rail. The map squared to the deck squared to the slot. The world made a shape I recognized. I held my breath until I could hear the small drips from the underside of the deck rather than the creek, and something in the corner of my eye argued with the straight edges. The paper's spur line, its neat little rightward detour, felt longer than what pressed under my boots. I measured with a finger on the page. The spur is a fingernail's width. My feet said half that tonight. I wrote the traitorous line, perceived shortening of spur, possible pace distortion, will measure. I walked back to the junction counting boards, then back to the deck counting boards, then again, 3 times, to give the night a chance to reset or to commit. Each time, the watch cheated in my favor by 2 to 4 minutes, as if distance had decided to share. The GPS refused to collude. It reported 0.30, 0.31, 0.30. The map, innocent, stayed ink. Document insert, clipped exact so a later mind can't swell the story. 1946 to 1859. Overlook spur, 3 traversals. Board count 58 each pass. Watch durations, 2 M57s, 3 M11s, 2 M52s. Expected 7-8 m at cautious pace. GPS segment 0.1 mi, no headlamps observed, no voices. At 1902, 3 things happened inside 1 minute. The tag on the deck twine lifted and settled, like the lot's tag A had, just a nod's worth. The radio's courtesy beep found its shadow again, an extra click almost under it, and the Maglite, resting belly down on the rail, made its small self-ring on the wet wood twice without moving, like sound had brushed it. I didn't put meaning on any of that. I made 3 lines with times and single-sentence descriptions. The line tolerates humility. On the way back to Cedar Flats, the late plank sigh went wrong by a beat, 2 board lengths too far back where no person could step without being in the creek. I stopped and put a single chalk X on the rail there, so my morning self couldn't claim I'd imagined the location. The iron smell rose to knuckle height again exactly where I had drawn the 1831 tick. I put a second tick, 1908, to make the map keep score with me. At the first bridge, the idea of the map misbehaved outright. The kiosk light's small pull should have been where it always is, 90 seconds beyond that bridge at my slow count. It showed early, 2 board lengths sooner than my mouth's quiet numbers said it should. The first time, I blamed myself and the wanting of an end to the test. The second time, I wrote, kiosk glow appeared 2 board lengths early by count. Visual distance compressed, will verify reverse. The third time, returning turnabout, the glow hid later than the count asked it to. That last line went into the notebook in uppercase because old instructors live in your wrist. Reverse leg longer than outbound by count. Watch says less. In the lot, the stripe was back to its business. 38 degrees 2 dig. 4. The twine tags across it hung without drama. The kids in the balance bikes and the folded map were gone. 2 sedans remained, asleep. I squatted at the stripe's midpoint and put a chalk dash on the gravel every 6 inches along the line from kiosk to post 1. Small, low, easy to wash with a boot if morning wanted them gone. The chalk made a dotted line the way maps do. I wrote, if the lot becomes a diagram, maybe the diagram will stay lot. Radio, dispatch to 12, timer check. 12 is good, I said. Observe temporal compression on Overlook spur, not corroborated by GPS distance. Installing chalk ticks along stripe. We'll do 1 more pass to junction and back with verbal count on channel for recording. Copy. Rolling recorder. I keyed the mic and counted boards out loud, like a metronome a student could follow. 1, 2, 3. My voice felt steadier than I deserved. At board 58, my foot landed against the first plank of the deck, and the watch said 1909-03. Deck, I told the recorder. I waited. I counted back. At 49, the deck's late sigh answered from behind as if the number had been bid on. At 1, the kiosk light blinked once, a clean human blink, and the channel went quiet without even a courtesy. I pulled the deck tag and pocketed it. I tightened at the camera ray strap 1 notch, not because it needed it, but because the deck would remember my hands in the morning. I aligned the map once more and found nothing wrong with ink. On the walk out, the fern pinnae at Cedar Flats had shifted 1 degree, or my guilt had. Their arrow pointed so exactly trailward that I wanted to believe a person had placed them, a human reason for a human gesture. I said, all right, out loud the way I say it, when a volunteer returns a tool to the wrong shelf, and I know we'll teach again tomorrow. The trees neither agreed nor refused. At the lot, a fresh voicemail waited. I let it play to the same quiet audience. Wind near mic. A board complaining late, but not any board I could place by habit, and my own sentence returned with a single verb changed. I'll be on foot, I had said earlier. The voice gave me, I'll be on. The last word hung there like a plank without screws. The padlock sound closed it up. I drew the night in the notebook as a geometry. Dotted chalk line, stripes of air, two twines, arrows on rails, a deck set too near and too far by turns. Beside it, I drew the map, the little spur a fingernail's width in a rectangle of trees. I brought the edges together, and they overlapped more than either wanted. I wrote in small letters so the sentence wouldn't look like a claim. Map and night disagree. Night shortens where map holds. On the drive back, the repeater found me, as it has begun to do, and offered a small mercy. It played my voice back whole. I'll be on foot, no truncation, and then kept my silence with me for the rest of the mile. When I signed off with dispatch, I told them we would need to walk that spur in daylight with a wheel counter and a tape, and they said they'd bring both. I did not tell them the part about the deck coming early and late. I left that for the chalk to explain. In the yard, with sodium light asking nothing, I wrote the last line for the ledger before the pen would stop behaving. If paper is promise, then tonight paper has a rival. Then I dated the page, closed the book, and put the chalk back in its sleeve with a care I reserve for the things that know how to keep quiet. Maintenance likes devices that take responsibility, so they arrived with a measuring wheel, a 100-meter fiberglass tape, and a shrug for the rain. We walked to the Overlook spur in daylight at 10:02 with coffee steam going sideways in the breeze. The wheel said 177 meters deck to junction. The tape, pulled snug from bolt head to arrow post, said 176.4. The map's .11 miles was a fair translation. Paper, wheel, tape, 3 adults who agreed. I watched them agree with a relief that felt like cheating on the ledger. Resource swapped the SD and the Overlook camera at 1009. We'll pull frames at the shop, they said. You want to drop in your inbox? Hard card if you can, I said, because screens talk too fast. I signed custody of yesterday's card with a date and a block letter 0A7134 to match my notes. We left the deck tag twine in place. The fluorescent flags at the lot made kids ask questions. I answered the questions with words about weather and mapping, because content for miners and parks is weather and mapping. The cold stripe measured 3 degrees at noon. Thinner air, less difference. But it still read as a stripe if you knelt and let skin tell you. I knelt, felt the shallow water sensation at my shin, and wrote 3942 to Sfin 3, midday, persists. The kiosk hum sounded like a hum. The after hours line forgot me all afternoon. Night is when stories permit themselves. I signed out Unit 24 at 1811, added a fresh pocket notebook because the first one had run out of courage where the lines end, and put a new set of AA batteries in the Maglite, even though the last set would have lasted, because fresh light is a promise I can keep. Barometer 29.76 and falling without theater. Air 41 degrees. The sky held rain in its teeth and thought about it. Dispatch. 12 status. 12 rolling to South Loop. Purpose, retrieve second camera card, test timing against radio recorder, verify chalk markers, monitor stripe. I'll remain on channel. Copy. No unknowns since last shift end. At 1831, the lot stood impartial. 4 cars now, new Subaru, old Volvo, the Ford with the serious dog, and a compact with a map folded like a napkin under the wiper. The fluorescent flags I'd tied survived a day of public curiosity. The chalk dashes were smudged in places by boots, not all of them mine. Stripe, 38 digun across, 42 div off, 4 returns. I wrote it clean as a tally. I let the radio recorder know what I was doing. 12 departing kiosk at 3-1 to Cedar Flats. Will retrieve trail cam SD at lot facing post on return. Voice check at every 100 feet by count. I set the watch and the pocket thermometer where I could see without fuss. Maglite beam low, surveyor's twine in the left cargo pocket, 2 permit tags in the notebook for whichever idea arrived first. Boardwalk 1 did its creek arithmetic. Boardwalk 2 recognized me and delivered my delayed step 1 board back, then 2 boards back near the lightning scar cedar, then on time again as if ashamed. I chalked an arrow under the rail at the 2 back place with 1839 beside it. The iron smell tracked my hands again. Knuckle height. I put a tick on the rail and another time, 1841, because protest in a notebook is still a line. The lot-facing trail cam sat on a post just this side of Cedar Flats, aimed toward the kiosk. Resource had set it yesterday with interval plus motion, IR low, time sync to dispatch. Its strap was tight. The unit blinked its small heartbeat. I unlocked the latch, named the unit aloud so my voice could meet it. Camera 2, and slid its SD card into a labeled zip with the hour. 1847. I loaded a fresh card and wrote the serial in the book. The simpler the ritual, the more often it holds. I took the Overlook spur because the map had behaved and maps reward visits. Pace steady, counting aloud on channel at 25 board intervals, so the recorder would give me something to argue with later. 25, 50, deck. The watch said 1852. The pace said I should have arrived 1855. The recorder would remember both or neither. The deck tag on its twine hung still, damp and obedient. The rail chalk palm, 2307, remained legible. The creek sang equal parts river and machine. I listed the elements like a ranger reciting a litany. Deck, rail, tag, creek, beam, wind light southeast, no headlamps. The courtesy beep answered. A second click followed, like punctuation. Document insert, because pinning moment saves the rest of the shift. 1852. Overlook deck, arrival by count early versus watch, 3M. Deck tag still, no visible subjects. Radio RIC logging on. On the return leg, at the two-back plank, the delayed sigh did not arrive. I stopped with my boots suspended, the way hovering makes a diagram in air. A breath later, the board behind me complained softly, not two back, but one ahead. Wrong by direction instead of by distance. I marked the rail with a second arrow pointing forward and did not trust my own sense of humor. Cedar Flats retained its fern and duff scent. The parallel barefoot tracks grazed a new indignity. A single print across the boardwalk treads where no bare foot should find purchase clean. Heel, mid-arch, ball, twin toes, right foot, printed on wet wood without smear. Not big, not small. I left it alone and did the thing that keeps future arguments short. Angle the Maglite, photograph the print with scale, and include the 2.1 mi marker in frame. The photo looked like a trick and like a fact at the same time. I told dispatch, flat as rainfall, one barefoot print on board, Cedar Flats, right foot, single, I am not leaving planks. I will document and return. Copy 12. A paper on their end. We have your recorder running. At the lot camera post, I cupped the latch out of habit, like keeping rain from an old cat, and removed the fresh card I had just loaded, because tonight needed frames that started in daylight to test a thing I wasn't naming. I slid the card into a reader on the county tablet in the truck, with the door open so the radio could hear me not talking. Directory showed images at regular 15-second intervals from yesterday afternoon through 1847 TC, plus motion frames when cars came and went. I side-scrolled fast until the daytime frames shrank to night. The kiosk glow looked honest. At 1829, a pair of headlights, Subaru, parked. A person in a rain shell stepped into frame, tied a boot, left. At 1837, the lot emptied in the middle of a series when Volvo took its rectangle elsewhere. The 1840s rolled by. Quiet lot, fine rain, flags limp, my chalk dots in their dotted line, the stripe visible only to a mind that had decided to see stripes. Then I hit 1847-15, 1847-30, 1847-45, empty, 1850, empty, and had to stop because my own count to the deck shouldn't have shown me back at the lot by 1850 anything. I scrolled forward to 1852-15. The trail mouth was a dark slot. The kiosk light hummed in 15-second stillness. And at 1852-30, the IR registered a pinkish bloom around nothing, standard low-glow behavior when moisture visits, followed at 1852-45 by a frame that showed me Unit 24 driver door open, my shoulder half in frame, head turned toward the radio. I had a beam in my right hand and the Overlook knot at my back where the board count had put me. The timestamp said I had arrived 2 minutes before I asked to. I did not name it. I logged frame numbers, C2 bore 185230, IR Bloom, C2 bore 185245, Ranger and Lot, watch discrepancy 3M. My pen wrote steadier than I deserved. Motion frames around 1903 made their own argument. The camera captured, at IR Bloom, the deck tag at the Overlook lifting. 3 pixels of upward shift at its midpoint, though that cam faced the lot, not the deck. I pinched to zoom in case fatigue had become mischief. The bloom was on the lot camera, not the deck. The deck tag could not appear there. I scrolled back and forward to be sure. C2 190300, IR bloom, and a faint diagonal in the frame, as if the world had worn a wrinkle. C2 Zama 190315. Normal. I wrote the numbers and the words apparent cross-scene impression because language balks at saying two places share a frame. Technique toolbox meant I should triangulate with radio. I keyed up. Dispatch 12. I'm going to play back an audio time from the recorder and match it to an image time. Stand by. I cued the recorder on the county tablet for 1852, the minute I'd spoken deck. The speaker gave me my own voice. Deck, clear at 1852:12. The camera showed me in the lot at 1852:45. The map on my knee wanted to complain about the tone of the conversation. I set the tablet aside and went back to the usual work, because usual work is a rope. I walked to the kiosk, measured stripe again, 3741 DERV, and set two new permit tags at shin height across it, labeled A2 and B2 with the time. The first pair, A and B, hung as before. Their ribbons had dried into their bends, a human habit preserved in nylon. At 1931, the after-hours line finally remembered me. Unknown. I let it go to voicemail. Rules hold. The message arrived. Wind near mic, then my own sentence in a tone borrowed from the careful vowels. Deck. Followed by my voice saying deck with a half-second delay, followed by the padlock click. Message length 8 seconds. The kiosk's pool of light held its ground. I wrote, VM contains layered deck. Two voices, mine and other, offset, then close lock. The Ford dog turned a slow circle in its sleep and sighed the way an animal sighs when human instruments try to make a good night into a chart. I wanted one more set of frames before I surrendered the card to the shop. I put the lot camera back in, tested a manual trigger, one frame of my hand at arm's length like a poor ghost, and set a schedule. I would step into the stripe at 1940, buy watch and leave at 1941, then at 1943, and I would key the radio and say, kiosk. The recorder would take the voice, the camera would take the air, the stripe would take what it always takes. Procedure calms. I did the thing. At 1940s, I stepped in and felt the shin pressure like creak in an argument with gravity. At 1941 Malk, I stepped out. At 1943 and I keyed kiosk. The courtesy beep came. The extra click answered as usual, polite and unnecessary. I scrolled the card to the 1940s. C294,000, me at stripe edge, left foot lifted, motion blur honest, seating 4055, empty lot, flag still, C214030, permit tag A2 lifted a finger's width, C2194045, A2 higher, B2 motionless, C2194100, both tags down, seating 4300, IR bloom again, diagonal, wrinkle present, C2194315. My face in three-quarter profile at the kiosk glass, reading our own map the way a person reads an answer they don't like. I had not gone to the glass. I had stood 3 feet back. I checked the property's time on the frame in case the overlay was lying. Both agreed, 1943-15. I wrote the sequence with short sentences like, I was tired of my own handwriting. I was. When routine fails you, tighten it. I backed the truck to the kiosk, so the headlights lit the map panel and took paper out of the equation. I taped a blank permit tag where the printed South Loop spur sits on the display and wrote now on it. Then I stepped back to the camera post and took one manual frame. The image showed the kiosk lit, my tag on the map. The word now crisp at 1947 pull. I removed the tag. I took another frame, empty glass at 1947-15. I did not inspect those frames for miracles. I wrote that they contained none. Radio, dispatch to 12, timer check. 12 good, I said. I'm securing camera 2's card. I recommend a time sync across cams and dispatch recorder at top of hour. Copy. Top of hour sync at 2000. I waited, because the best experiments sometimes involve clocks and not ideas. At 2000 now, I keyed. 12 time, mark 20000. The recorder took it. The lot camera registered IR bloom, and then a frame of nothing, as if it had elected to be on time in a way that had no picture. I smiled without humor and wrote, Cam acknowledges hour with nothing. Radio's okay. On the walk to the truck, the delayed plank sighed 3 boards after my footfall, too late to belong to me. The extra click on the radio pre-answered a sentence I had not yet formed. The stripe read 3640 degrees. 4 stubborn witnesses in a park that does not ask for such witnesses. I bagged the card, labeled the bag, and set it on the passenger seat beside the first notebook, as if paper could keep company. I told the dispatch I was clearing the lot and would hand-deliver the card to the shop. No subjects observed, I said, as if that was the whole truth. Half a mile down, the repeater did its duty and played me back. Not the old "I'll be on," but tonight's deck. It said the word once in my tone. A half second after, the after-hours phone lit and pushed a voicemail with the same word, deck, in the careful vowels. I didn't play them together. I wrote, 2 decks, 1 me. At the yard, sodium lamps made the rain look like clean wire. I signed the card into the evidence drawer. With 2 locks and a sigh, the drawer returned. In the truck, before I shut down, I wrote a last line on the last page of the fresh notebook. If devices are witnesses, tonight they disagree on when I was. Then I closed the book and let the night keep the larger part of its say for another pass. Morning shop talk wears daylight like armor. Resource pulled stills from camera 2 and printed 4 frames on glossy paper, the kind that makes facts feel heavier. The IR bloom at 1943 Adieu had the diagonal wrinkle like a folded page. The frame at 1852-45 showed me next to Unit 24 when my watch had me on the deck. We did not argue with paper because paper won yesterday and today both. Maintenance logged the kiosk photo cell as operating per spec. Dispatch synced recorder time to WDBV at 1200 sharp because clocks, at least, can be put on a leash. The plan for night 8 was simple and smaller than my irritation wanted. Listen at the mile marker and do nothing clever. The South Loop carries a wooden mileage post where the boardwalk meets the upland path. White 2 stenciled on brown, the same 2.1 mi painted on the deck planks back at Cedar Flats. Day hikers take pictures there when the number feels like an achievement. I had passed it half a dozen times without granting it authority. Tonight it would be a witness. I signed Unit 24 at 2014 because the park, after a long day, is honest with itself. The kids gone, headlamps not yet begun, the creek running a middle register after yesterday's rain. Barometer 29.74 and falling like a promise kept too long. Air 40 leaning down. I added a clothespin to the kit, wood, spring clean, because a clothespin holds without argument, and tonight needed something simple. Maglite, map, permit tags, field notebook, same order, same pockets. The lot at South Loop had 3 cars. The Ford with the serious dog, the Subaru from yesterday, a rental with a white barcode sticker on the window, still smelling faintly of cinnamon air freshener. The fluorescent flags across the cold stripe were damp and loyal, their ribbons dark toward the knot. Pocket thermometer, 37 degree on stripe, 41 degree off. 4 again, free of poetry. I wrote the figures before anything else could ask for my pencil. Dispatch 12, I keyed. Departing kiosk at 22. Stationary listen at mile marker 2 for 20 minutes, then return. If I go silent, ring me at 10. I hesitated only because speaking gives night the shape of a room. Please keep recorder on channel. Copy 12, recorder rolling. Unknown line quiet since 1800. Boardwalk 1 liked my footfalls where I put them. Boardwalk 2 remembered its old trick. 1 delayed board sigh 2 lengths back, then went quiet near the lightning scar cedar as if bored with me. Cedar Flats smelled fern and cold bark, and a line of metal at knuckle height again. I added a chalk tick to the rail, 20-31, because if it's a game, then score it. The mile marker stands just beyond the second rise, where the boardwalk returns to dirt and the trail's footing goes from slick plank honesty to fine duff and small roots. The 2 is not a mile from anywhere literal. It's a loop number from an older brochure and survives because inertia is a form of tradition. I set the Maglite underhand, thumb to switch, beam downcast to let the forest keep its night. I planted a permit tag on the marker's nail, Ranger here, because the tag isn't for whatever else is near. It's for me to see that I took myself seriously. Procedural texture calms the part of the brain that wants to name. I wrote the station setup as if I were teaching a recruit. 2034, MM2, under hemlock canopy, light SE, air 39 to GF, P thermometer chest height, Maglite to low, radio squelch 2 ticks up, insert ear, left, free. Stand with marker at right shoulder, face east towards Cedar Flats, back to small rise. Timer, 20 minutes. Goal, listen only. The first 5 minutes gave me permission to be a person. Breath, a raven somewhere downstream, a near inaudible water bead leaving a maple leaf to speak to its neighbor. The creek carried its steady argument. No headlamps winked through timber. A single car door far off put a soft square into the air and then accepted its own silence. I wrote what didn't matter so the page would catch the one thing that did. It did at 2041, when the radio gave the NOAA voice its mountain forecast and the word ridges, snagged like thread, pulled and came out longer than the sentence had sewn for it. The courtesy beep followed. The extra click trailed it like a second thought. I wrote stutter ridges very small because I didn't want the word to grow. At 2:94, the after-hours phone lit in the dash back at the lot, surely. It always lights now when I'm trying to keep still. I let it ring out because rules are ropes. The voicemail posted, I didn't play it. The choice to listen is not the same as the decision to know. At 2047, the mile marker itself earned the subtitle of this part. A voice came the way cold air does, along the ground, patient, sure, and it used my cadence without the dignity of my radio. Ranger 12, it said, and no static wrote it. The vowels wore the careful shape I'd heard in the unknown calls, like someone aiming at the center of local speech and arriving only near it. It wasn't loud. If I'd been walking, I would have missed it as creek. It said my call sign and waited as if a map somewhere had promised an answer. No radio contact, I said aloud, quietly, to make that line true the way writing makes other lines true. The voice tried again with the shape of a sentence I knew too well. I'll be on, it began, and then did not finish, not because it had lost its word, but because the word didn't belong to it. The last syllable lifted, intonation a person uses when reading off a page they can't quite see. I recorded the time, the words, the direction, bearing 210 degrees by guess and not by compass, and set the clothespin on the mile marker's edge as if that could hold the sound in place. It looked foolish and made me feel less so. The sensory economy tonight allowed one smell and one touch. Smell. Cold iron again, knuckle height, now sliding to wrist height, as if the layer rose with the breath from the ground, cooling faster than the air above. Touch. The mile marker post had a damp chill, appropriate to the hour until 2050, when the wood under my palm went from park night cold to creek water cold for 2 seconds, then back without apology. I made the note verbatim. Post-Tempe, briefly creek-like, returned. At 2052, the voice used a new trick. It borrowed my own notebook sentence. Please remain where you can be seen. The please wore the careful vowels. The rest were mine. It did not come from the radio. The channel rested quiet. It came from the direction of the to, small, close, as if the number carried language the way a ship's bell carries weather. Technique. Document insert to trap a slippery thing. 2 Theater 52. MM2, voice, ground level, no radio carrier. Speaking my phrasing was altered polite vowel set. Direction 210 degree plus Ds. Not loud. Would read as creek if moving. Recorded text. Please remain where you can be seen. I tapped the mic and made my voice bureaucratic so the recorder would prefer facts. Dispatch 12, stationary at South Mile Marker. I have ambient voice not on channel, low amplitude, bearing approx 210. Content mirrors prior voicemails, no subjects visible. The courtesy beep answered. The extra click came late, as if embarrassed to be seen. Copy 12, dispatch said, and I heard paper. Unknown line just pinged and dropped. We'll mark your location. I gave myself one test because tests are easier to believe than hunches. I took a permit tag, wrote now in my block letters, clipped it to the mile marker with the clothespin, and stepped back 3 paces. I held the Maglite steady on low and watched the paper's shadow live on the post. At 2056, the wind went absent on purpose and the tag lifted a 1/4 inch on its spring without my seeing the air that moved it. The clothespin did not shift. The shadow made a sharp oval and then returned to its rectangle, like someone had closed a door gently. I took a single photo with scale and wrote the word oval, then felt foolish again and accepted the feeling. I let the timer run to its last minute and gave the night one open door. If you need me, I said, you can use the radio. It sounded silly in my own ears because radios are rules and the night was something else. The courtesy beep came without my keying. The extra click followed. Then the NOAA bot read a number as if it were an apology. 2008. I wrote the digits because numbers behave even when they don't belong. The walk back to the lot gave me the old games. The delayed planks sighed at 1.5 lengths when the creek would have preferred 2. The iron smell went shoulder high, then disappeared entirely where I had placed the 1831 tick on the rail last night, like a person stepping aside for a person without moving. I put a second tick, 2059, and made the kind of taut circle around it my handwriting makes when I'm trying not to hurry. At the lot, the stripe lay from kiosk to post 1 with its calm, rude difference. 306040-4, a number you can trust even if you don't like it. Tag A2 hung, B2 hung, A and B hung, their ribbons glowed a damp darker. I sat in the cab with the door open for the radio and played the voicemail that had landed at 24. Wind near mic, the board delay, then my call sign in those careful vowels. Ranger 12. And the voice waited, as if the phone asked it to, then added what it had said to me at the mile marker. Please remain, and cut off before it could finish with the padlock sound, as if manners had won and then lost. Dispatch, I said, because a ledger is only honest when someone else sees it. 12 has ambient non-radio voice at MM2 matching voicemail content within 8 minutes. I advise a second unit in daylight to test acoustics along the loop with a portable speaker, playbacks of standard callouts at set intervals, mark hearing thresholds. Tonight, I'll run one more pass to MM2 and back with live time marks on channel. Copy 12, we'll prep a speaker for morning. I did the second pass slower, voice over radio at every 25 boards, my breath deliberately honest. 25, 50, 75. The recorder would give me a staircase later. At the mile marker, I stood 20 seconds without grand gestures, then turned and walked back as evenly as a metronome. Between 50 and 25 on the return, the courtesy beep came without me and the extra click followed after a polite delay, as if someone nearby had learned where the beep belonged and was trying to keep time. Back at the kiosk, I drew the mile marker in the notebook, the way a child would draw a sign. Rectangle, number 2, clothespin clipped to its side, tag shadow oval for 1 frame in my mind's camera. Next to it, I sketched the dotted chalk line across the stripe and the fluorescent ribbons hanging like small tired flags. Underneath, I wrote a sentence that will look like poetry to a supervisor who doesn't like poetry. The marker spoke because I let it. Then I crossed out spoke and wrote borrowed my voice in small letters because small letters are easier to defend. I put the truck in gear and let the wheels remember the park road home. Half a mile down, the repeater performed our ritual. It gave me my own I'll be on. Then, for the first time, finished the sentence in my voice with the wrong word. I'll be on scene. The after-hours phone lit, polite as always, delivered a voicemail that consisted of nothing but the padlock click. I did not play it twice. In the yard, sodium light made the map on my passenger seat look like a plan. I wrote the night's last line on the page because endings matter even in a part that isn't one. If the loop shortens and voices learn, the job is to keep the map honest until morning. I closed the book on the clothespin so the spring would keep the page from turning by itself. By noon, the speaker test had given us something as close to a control as the park allows. Resource hiked the loop with a portable PA, stopping every 100 meters to play 2 phrases we use in the real world. Park ranger, call back please, and are you injured? And a sweep tone at 1 kHz. Maintenance and I stood at the kiosk, at Cedar Flats, and at the mile marker with clipboards. Results were boring in the way you pray for. The voice carried farther down creek, shorter upgrade, and the sweep tone fell off like math says it should. No mysterious amplifications. No voices that arrived without lungs. That gave us permission to notice the strange thing the cold stripe did at 1408. It thinned until the pocket thermometer only read a 2-degree difference, and then, while we stood there pretending not to look, slid 3 feet east along the gravel like a river deciding on a new bank. We chalked its edges and left. The park was busy enough to sand off whatever we thought we'd found. It always does. I signed Unit 24 back out at 1916 with a kit that looked like a hardware store drawer. Maglite with fresh AAs, field notebook 2/3 done, 2 permit tags, surveyor's twine, gaffer tape, chalk, pocket thermometer, spare batteries, clothespin, a small squeeze bottle of unscented talc from Visitor Services artifact handling kit. I signed it out like a cradle. And because maps deserve companionship, a cheap bubble level to set on rails. Barometer 29.72, falling without drama. Air 39 degrees. Cloud shelf low enough that the ridgelines wore hats. Dispatch knew the plan because I'd said it too many times. 12 will attempt to map the stripe's position over time from kiosk to post 1 and, if feasible, along the first boardwalk run. Fixed readings every 3 minutes for 30 minutes, then a traverse. Recorder rolling? Rolling, they said. Unknown line, quiet an hour. The lot had shuffled cars again. The dog in the Ford opened one eye and closed it like we had agreed to take care of each other later. The fluorescent flags across the stripe, A, B, A2, B2, hung like wet laundry. The chalk dashes I'd laid last night were scuffed, but legible. I took a baseline. Stripe center 36 degrees off toward 40 degrees. 4 again. I marked the center with a small talc puff to see if powder would behave like vapor or like sand. It settled in place and made a faint constellation that the Maglite loved too much. I sneezed once and considered that a field note. Procedural texture, positions at exactly 3-minute intervals. 1921. Stripe center between kiosk footing and dash na 4. 1924. No change. 1927. Center moved east, 2 chalk dashes. Thermometer 35-39 degrees. I made the dots smaller, less visible to visitors, and more accusatory to me. By 1933, the stripe had kinked near post 1 and flared wider toward the kiosk, as if someone had nudged a rope with a boot and then let go. The bubble level on the kiosk rail stayed honest. The lot wasn't sinking. At 1936, I set the surveyor's twine low across the stripe again, this time in 3 lines: shin height, tag C, ankle height, tag D, and a third thrown lower, blade height, tag E, all with permit tags folded and labeled in block letters. I told dispatch, setting flag CDE, static until 1945. Then a slow walk to boardwalk 1 with spot temps every 10 meters. Copy 12, the stripe breathed. Tag C lifted once, half an inch. Tag D twice, smaller. Tag E hung stubborn. The cold read not only as number, but as direction tonight. When I stood with my shins in it, the pressure walked left to right like the creek had been rerouted along the gravel. I wrote, Flowlar knee height constant, then crossed constant because it wasn't. At 1939, the left to right reversed like a tide change without any schedule I own. I put small talc stars along the center line at every 2 feet from kiosk to post 1. Powder settles where the hand puts it. It does not migrate without help. At 1942, I watched the constellation brighten slightly in the Maglite, as if humidity had thickened the powder. The thermometer said 35-39 degrees and held its small argument against me. The radio offered NOAA's routine, then the courtesy beep, then the extra click after the beep, as if someone clapped softly at the end of a presentation. I took that clap with me and began the traverse. Boardwalk 1 meets the lot like a signed contract. I set the bubble level on the first rail. It's centered. I wrote the numbers anyway. I took stripe readings at the threshold and found the cold as keen at shin height crossing wood as crossing gravel. At 10 meters, the stripe narrowed to a ribbon you could miss with pants and catch with bootlaces. At 20, it slid, no other word, off the boards to hang along the rail, shin high, as if the line preferred the boundary. I held the thermometer's bulb exactly where my kneecap wanted to be and wrote 34-38 D4 at rail only. Breadcrumbs need company. Smell at 20 meters, cedar first, then a stainless note like a sink faucet bitten by cold, then fresh water. Sound. Delayed board sigh not matching my footfall, too late, then one early near the lightning scar cedar. Touch. The rail cold snapped brief to creek cold and back while my palm lay on it, a 2 count, like the mile marker last night. I recorded each as a single line to keep them small. At 1951, where the boardwalk bends toward the creek and returns, the stripe made a choice, and I watched it do it. It separated. One thread stayed at shin height along the rail. A second thinner ribbon occupied ankle height across the boards at a whimsy of angles my notebook struggled to honor. I puffed 2 tiny talc dots and watched. Both sat. The Maglite haloed them like mistakes that had decided to stay. I put an arrow on the page. Bifurcation. Then another note. No wind felt. Radio. Dispatch to 12. Timer check. Recorder good. 12 good. Recording bifurcation. Cold line at rail and at ankle height crossboard. Copy, they said, and I heard paper again, the administrative comfort of it. Cedar Flats received me with the honest smell of cedar, then cut the scent with cold iron at wrist height, higher than earlier nights, and a sweetness like crushed bracken. The parallel barefoot tracks, which I tire of writing about like a person tires of being correct but not helpful, carried a new neighbor. The single print on the board I had photographed last night now had a twin on the opposite board. Heel exact, ball sure, toes splayed lightly as if adjusting balance. Not a hop, not a run, just a person walking small on wet wood where a person ought not to. I documented with the scale card and did not step off. At the Overlook spur junction, I set the bubble level on the arrow post. The bubble wandered a hair, which posts will do when seasons remember them. I turned to let the deck wait and looked back down the corridor we'd measured a dozen times. The kiosk light should not be visible from there. Terrain says so. Map says so. It wasn't. I wrote the non-sighting to remind myself that sanity is mostly a ledger of normal. I took the deck because I am obedient to my own bad habits. The tag on the deck twine hung straight. I set the bubble level across the top rail and watched the bubble tremble once, then rest center. I laid the pocket thermometer on the rail and read 38 degrees, close to air. I left both in place and stepped back. At 2003, the after-hours phone lit. I let it write its voicemail. I did not play it. Instead, I looked at the bubble and the thermometer and told the deck my plan like a carpenter talking to a board. I'm going to stand in line with the rail for 1 minute. If you wish to move the air, move it. I counted out 60 seconds by breath. At 23, the bubble slid left one width, then returned. The thermometer dipped to 36 degrees and came back a degree. The rail under my hand went creak cold again, and then honest. I wrote, deck shows stripe behavior at rail, transient. Technique, document insert to trap the minute, concise, 2003-2004. Overlook deck, rail bubble, drift left one width ones. P, thermometer on rail 38 to 36, 37 deg, palm cold event X1. Deck tag unmoved. I collected the bubble and thermometer like a farmer gathering tools from a fence at dusk, and walked back toward the lot with the deliberate smallness of a man who knows his pace has been borrowed before. The stripe kept me company along the rail, at times to my left shin, then crossing in front of my knee to claim the right as if a hand dragging a ribbon tested where I would notice. I brought the pocket recorder on the phone up and whispered times as I passed chalk ticks. The radio's extra click pre-answered each whisper by a beat, as if it enjoyed its role more than I enjoyed giving it one. At Boardwalk 1, I found the lot again holding its shape. The fluorescent tags, A through E, hung. The talc dots still made their small constellation. The thermometer said 35 to 39 degrees 4. I walked across the stripe and felt the pressure rise to thigh height, not knee, then drop to ankle near the kiosk step, then leave entirely at post 1 as if the line had chosen a new endpoint while I was a person in transit. I taped a permit tag to the kiosk glass over the printed south loop, exactly on the ink line from lot to post 1, and wrote line in capital letters with an arrow pointing toward the trail. I took a single photo, then peeled the tag and folded it into the notebook. If you make a map on top of a map, sometimes one of them will give. The mile marker pulled me like a magnet you learn to keep in your pocket. I told dispatch I would hold at MM2 for 10 minutes and keep the channel clean unless addressed. Copy, they said, which is the radio's lullaby. Standing still has its own arithmetic. At 20 Dean, the voice that likes careful vowels arrived like it owned the lower foot of the air. Ranger 12. A pause that held room for manners. Remain where you can be seen. At the NOAA bot delivered 2003 in its machine amplitude right after, as if the park could be persuaded into order by numbers alone. The courtesy beep fell on the last digit. The extra click arrived late by a heartbeat like an apology. Smell. Clean metal for 1 second at knee height. Touch. The mile marker post cooled like creak again on a 2 count and let go. Sound. The delayed board sigh at a remove that did not match the boards by count. Breadcrumb pair, enough to keep a ranger honest. There is a rule that says don't chase what you cannot describe. I obeyed it by changing nothing but my pen. I wrote in small letters so a supervisor could stand over the page and see only work. MM2 voice non-radio, content repeats, air stratified at knee and ankle. Stripe moved left to right earlier and reversed. Then I drew the stripe as a line from kiosk to post 1 and sketched it skirting the rail at 20 meters and bifurcating near the bend. Dotted dots of talc, tags AE hanging like little teeth. Children draw better. I left it in because I wanted the line to live somewhere besides the air. On the return, the lot offered one more honest measurement. I set the thermometer at 12 inches over gravel off stripe and read 40 degrees. In stripe at same height, 36 degrees. Over stripe at 36 inches, 39 degrees. As if the layer had a ceiling. I stacked numbers like bricks so the rest of it wouldn't ask to be a cathedral. I told dispatch, we have a measurable layered flow across the lot at night. It moves. It bifurcates on board. It visits the deck rail in brief. It is not wind. It acts like a shallow creek that forgot ground. I recommend we bring a smoke pen tomorrow, lab grade, and an IR thermometer. Copy, they said after paper noises. This is a first for this desk. I let the after-hours voicemail play then, because the ledger needed both sides. Wind near mic, not wind, a cabinet's private air. The padlock click at the beginning instead of the end, like someone had opened something before speaking. Then, my own voice and the careful vowels speaking together, layered but not exactly aligned. I'll be on scene, and a board side 2 counts late. The message timestamp read 2003-21. The deck's rail had breathed then. I put one line in the book and made the period heavier than I needed to. Lot heard deck. Half a mile down the park road, the repeater gave me its habit. Tonight, it took I'll be on and left it in the middle of the cab like a tool with no shelf to go back to. I did not fill the sentence. I told the steering wheel what I could promise. We'll draw the line again at dawn. Paper cannot move. The wheel, trained to its own job, hummed a little at 45 mph. The map in the passenger footwell did not blink. The stripe would be waiting, a river that chose to run across gravel and wood and rail, a mapless thing that had found a way to be measured. My job was to keep measuring without letting my hand write a word that didn't belong. I signed off with dispatch in the same voice I use when a student asks if a trail ever gets less steep. I said what we always say. It keeps doing what it's doing, and we keep our feet. By afternoon, the park had lent us better tools. Resource checked out a smoke pen from Collections, lab grade, glycerin-based, the kind we use to visualize HVAC leaks without making a smell people complain about. Maintenance signed for an IR thermometer gun with a fresh calibration sticker, and, because I asked, a handful of short fiberglass survey stakes with reflective tape already wrapped. Looks like we're laying out a kid's bike rodeo, one of them said. Just lines, I answered, because that's what this has been. We agreed on a simple protocol that would make a morning memo not feel like a story. At dusk, I would set a closed loop, our perimeter, from kiosk to post 1 and back again using twine at 2 heights, shin and knee, with permit tags as visual tells and stakes to keep the twine off gravel. I'd dust a light talc line under the twine, mark 5 fixed stripe probe points with tiny numbered flags, and take IR thermometer readings every solid minutes for half an hour. The smoke pen would ride at each flag for 10 seconds. Lens filmed on the county tablet. Radio recorder on for time marks. If the thing wanted to cross, it would have to step over a rope we could see. Barometer 2970, falling without drama. Air 39 degrees, drizzle fine enough to pretend to be fog. I added a spare Maglite to Unit 24 because fresh light is a promise, and redundancy is how we sleep. Field notebook on the passenger seat. First book full, second book 3/4. Trail map folded to South Loop, its crease now polished like bone. The lot at 1908 carried 3 cars, the Ford dog dignified in its patience. The kiosk's hum felt honest. Stripe at baseline, pocket thermometer 36 degree across, 40 degree off. The number had become a kindness. I wrote it before I let myself look at the rest. Procedural texture, because that's what keeps hands steady. 1912. Set fiberglass stakes in a rectangle from kiosk footing to post 1 and back to kiosk. 2 legs 6 feet from the chalk dashes I'd laid, 2 legs hugging them. Twine strung at 14s and 22s with permit tags every 6 feet, labeled P1, P8. Talc a thin path under both twines, 1 hand width wide, dusted with a fingertip so the gravel didn't look like a crime scene. 5 stripe probe flags at ankle height, numbered 1 through 5 from kiosk outward at 0 feet, 6 feet, 12 feet, 18 feet, 24 feet. IR gun baseline, flag 1 in 39 degree at 36, 36 degree at 12, flag 5 ELS 40 degree at 36 in 36 degree at 12. I keyed dispatch. 12 establishing perimeter loop at South Loop lot. Static readings every 5 minutes, smoke pen video at each flag, recorder rolling. Rolling, they said, paper making its small weather behind the voice. At 1915, the smoke pen showed me a thing that made me grateful for rules. At flag 1, shin height, the stream drifted left to right, a thin ribbon quiet as thought. At knee height, it stalled, pooled, then slid right to left, a reversal within 2 hand spans. I filmed 10 seconds, counted aloud for the recorder, wrote, counterflow between 12s and 22 at kiosk, and circled it once because the circle was for me. IR gun at the same moment mapped the loop's bottom edge as 3 degrees cooler than the air at every point except one, between flags 3 and 4 where the gravel read 34 de Druve in a thumbprint shape, warmer at its center. I dusted that spot with less talc and saw nothing but damp stones except their white. Tag P2 lifted a 1/4 inch and settled, the exact nod I'd come to know. P5 stayed obedient. P7 twitched, not up but forward along the line, as if a hand had brushed the ribbon with a gloved knuckle. No wind against my shins, kiosk light steady. I wrote the small words, movement along twine, document insert, so the later memo has a shape, 1915-1920, South Loop Lot, perimeter loop, smoke pen at flag 1, 12, LR, 22, RL, counterflow, IR ground, 34 Dave thumbprint near flag 3-4, rest 36 Dave stripe versus 40 Dave off. Tags, P2 lift, P7 forward twitch. Were radio quiet, courtesy beep, correct, extra click, late by 0.5s. At 1921, I walked the inner leg with the smoke pen and let my knees tell me where the line lived. Between flags 2 and 3, shin height flow strengthened, then vanished as if a footbridge had ended. Knee height went slack. The pen's plume climbed straight for 2 heartbeats, then bent into the lot toward Unit 24, struck the truck's bumper air, and smudged out. The IR gun held its temper. Numbers behaved. The stripe did not. The radio gave NOAA the word advisory and stumbled on the V, pulled it too long. The courtesy beep followed. A second click answered, like a participant who has learned when to clap. I took a baseline of the boardwalk threshold, because every time I pretend it's only the lot, the boards remember to teach me. Shin height smoke there slid toward the rail in a narrow, insistent thread. Ankle height hung neutral, knee height came back toward the kiosk. I placed the bubble level on the rail, it centered. I wrote no tilt beside the arrows I drew for flows, and then reminded my hand to stay small. At 1926, the after hours line lit. Unknown. I let it go to voicemail, because carrying 2 conversations seldom makes one true. The message posted with its little envelope icon, and I didn't open it. Instead, I extended the loop. Twine across the boardwalk threshold at shin height, tied to the post. A single tag on it, PX, so the task would have a name. I filmed smoke at the twine and watched the plume detach from my hand and hurry under the line toward Cedar Flats, obedient to nothing I could feel. Tag P4 lifted and didn't settle this time. It rode the twine 3 inches, stopped at the knot like a leaf, learning about string, and stayed. P6 rotated half a twist and righted. I wrote, loop beginning to act like a net. I heard how that sounded and didn't scratch it out. IR gun at 1930. Flag 1 ground 35 degree, 12 in air 36 degree, 36 is 39 degree. Flag 5 ground 35 degree, 12 at 36 degree, 36 in 39 degree. Map numbers, and my breath agreed. A layer the thickness of a hand schoolchild high and stubborn as a habit. I told dispatch, 12 marking last perimeter, closed loop active, observing persistent layered flow and lateral tag movement. I'll hold until 40, then do 1 pass to MM2 for a compare. Copy, they said. Unknown line dropped a voicemail at 1926. We will not play it unless you request. Please hold, I said, and let the request be a rule. Cedar Flats from the lot felt present the way a person in a dark room feels present, a slight shape to the air. I walked to the boardwalk twine PX with the smoke pen and pulled the plume under the line where shin would go. It shot away toward the cedar like a minnow finding a current. Knee height came back toward the lot like a reflection of the same fish. I filmed 10 seconds and heard my own count sit neatly on the recorder. Nothing loud spoke. The board behind me sighed late at the wrong distance, and I put a chalk X there so a morning mind would have to step on it to call me mistaken. The Overlook wanted attention, but tonight I had given my promise to a rectangle of string and tags. I returned to the loop and found the talc dust under P2 disturbed. No footprints, just a shallow scallop the width of a hand, edge clean as if a lid had lifted and set down. I touched the edge with the back of my glove, powder held. The IR gun read the scallop's center 33-degree, the coldest number I had written yet. I wrote it again out of disbelief and let the repetition be permission. I set the smoke pen mid-loop without my hand near and watched the tiny plume lean toward the kiosk, stop at the talc edge like it had been told to, then slide along the line to P3 and vanish under P3 as if a seam had opened. The twine did not move. The tag did not lift. I recorded those words like a clerk. The radio keyed with carrier only, 3 seconds exactly, as if I'd set a stopwatch, and released. The courtesy beep waited and did not arrive. A small breach of etiquette after a week of tidy manners. The extra click came anyway, a lone applaud in a quiet room. I wrote it because numbers had not suffered yet. "Dispatch," I said, "this is 12. I'm going to step into the loop at the kiosk corner and stand for 60 seconds. Please mark time." Copy, marking, paper again. Standing in a rope you tied yourself teaches a person about his own appetite for being wrong. Shin-high pressure walked left to right and then reversed halfway through my minute. Knee-high drifted the opposite way. My trousers felt the slightest brush of moving cold at mid-calf, like a creek deciding whether I deserved it. At second 51, the after-hours phone lit and delivered a voicemail. At 59, the kiosk hum swelled a tone, eased, and stayed. I stepped out, wrote, "Loop crosses human as if you were not a post." I allowed myself one listen. The voicemail spoke wind near a microphone that wasn't in this weather. Then a board side 2 beats late. Then 2 voices. Mine and the careful vowels. Layered, both saying the same sentence slowly, as if the sentence had to be taught as it was being said. Ranger 12, remain, seen. The lock sound did not close it. It opened it. The timestamp read 1926-31, the moment I'd tied PX. I set the notebook on the kiosk shelf where the map lives so the page and the ink could swear to each other without me. I wrote low enough that the Ford dog couldn't read it. Last perimeter holds a shape that can be drawn and crossed and is learning, or I am. Numbers still 4. Times still wrong. Boards still delayed. Voices more polite than the dark has to be. I pulled the twine and tags after one more 5-minute round, because leaving a trip line in a public lot makes a different kind of story, and bagged 2 of the tags, P2, P4, with notes on their movements in case anyone asks later whether nylon remembers. I left a short run of twine on the boardwalk PX so morning hands could feel the thread snap if they didn't believe the writing. There was the small question of MM2 and the larger question of whether I'd promised to test it. I told dispatch, 12 will hold at mile marker for 10. If I go quiet, ring at 5. Copy, came back. We were both careful by now. The mile marker stood where such posts stand, innocent in the way lumber is. The clothespin from last night still lay in my pocket. I clipped it to the side of the post and set a permit tag under it that read "Now," because naming the present felt like a dare worth keeping. I stood with one ear to the trees and one to the creek. The first sound was not the voice. It was the bubble of the stripe, if a stripe could make a sound. Knee-height cold passing left to right over boots at a careful speed, then right to left. Then the voice that had learned too much in a week said, "Almost well, Park Ranger," and then said what I had said to dispatch a dozen times over these nights, how I begin every check-in, but with the last 2 words filed off, "I'll be on." The courtesy beep arrived without a carrier. The extra click took its time. The air cooled my palm where it touched the 2, the way a creek makes a post honest for 1 count, then let go. I let the timer ring me because letting a timer ring you proves you still can. I told dispatch, 12 clear of MM2, returning to lot to collapse perimeter. The board sighed 1 beat late near the lightning scar cedar as if they regretted it. The iron smell arrived at wrist height and dropped to ankle when I took the next step, as if the line had dipped to avoid my hand. In the lot, the talc constellation had smudged exactly where P2 had toured the twine earlier. The rest lay in tidy freckles. The IR gun gave me my 4s. I lifted PX from the boardwalk, and the knot left a clean impression in the damp post like punctuation. I swept my palm through the remaining powder to make the gravel just look like gravel for whoever would count mats in daylight. I sat in Unit 24 with the notebook open and the map folded to the page that keeps trying to shorten. I wrote this part's last 2 lines like I was teaching the steering wheel to work nights. We set a last perimeter, and the line crossed it as if it knew it would. The job tomorrow is to draw it again and pretend we don't know that already. A half a mile down the road, the repeater offered its habit and, as if practicing, got the sentence right, slowly, in my voice, but not mine. I'll be on scene. The padlock click didn't close anything. It sounded like a door I couldn't see opening somewhere I knew by heart. Dawn works differently after a week like this. Instead of bringing answers, it just lets you see the questions without a flashlight. Maintenance met me at the yard at 05:35, eyes red, thermos steaming. Resource had the smoke pen, the IR gun, and a measuring wheel already chalked at 0. I signed Unit 24 like I always do, odometer, fuel, time, and added 2 of the little survey stakes that hadn't lost their reflective tape in last night's drizzle. I took a fresh field notebook because the second one had turned soft at the corners from rain and pencil. The trail map folded open to South Loop as if it wanted to be useful again. I set the park radio on channel 2 and set it plain. 12 rolling to South Loop for first light verification. Stripe, boardwalk, MM2. Will include upper switchbacks as needed. Copy 12, dispatch said. Recorder rolling. Unknown line has been quiet since 01. Wind at the shop door. Still. Barometer 29.68. Falling like it didn't expect to be asked about it. Airy 38 derv. I wrote the numbers because numbers show up for work, even when we don't know why we're here. The road to the lot climbs in 2 polite switchbacks through second growth fir. A grade the road crew keeps honest with gravel and that little overtone of brake dust you only smell before sunrise. The first turn presents the ridge like a straight edge. The second gives you the creek. On the last rise, a raven lifted off the kiosk roof with a sound like someone folding a map and laughed once, because ravens are allowed to. At 0604, the lot sat like a diagram I'd made yesterday. The fluorescent tags were gone. I'd pulled them. The chalk dashes had survived where feet hadn't scuffed. The talc constellation had washed to a patient fog around the kiosk footing. The stripe was there, of course. Fainter than night, but not absent. Pocket thermometer, 37 degree across, 41 degree off. 4 again, though the sun was a rumor in the alders. I marked the result without ceremony. 0606, .4 persists. We agreed on a fast loop of facts. IR readings at the 5 little flag position, the scenes I'd set last night. Smoke pen at shin and knee, then a single traverse to Cedar Flats and a listen at the mile marker. After that, I would go up, just me, to the first road switchback that looks down on the lot. If a line wants to be seen, let's see it from where we don't stand in it. Procedural texture steadies hands. 0608, flag 1, IR ground 35 dish, 12 in air 36 dish, 36 39 dish, smoke pen, shin LR, knee slight RL. 611. Flag 3, IR ground 34 DGF, thumbprint shape persists, 1236 dig, took, shin neutral, 2s, then LR, knee back toward kiosk, counterflow intact, resource set a fresh camera at the kiosk facing post 1. Interval 10 seconds, time sync to dispatch. Maintenance checked the kiosk breaker again and said, with fond contempt, still boring. Ran the smoke pen across the threshold to boardwalk 1 and watched the plume choose the rail again, sliding along it as if someone had laid a string and then made it into a river. Document insert, so the memo isn't all memory. 0615, kiosk. Threshold, shin height plume follows rail towards Cedar Flats. Knee height returns. IR on rail, 36 derv, ambient 39 derv, no wind recorded. We walked the boardwalk like people in a museum who have seen the art already. Boardwalk 2 gave me 1 delayed bored sigh in the right place, then none near the lightning scar cedar, as if the habit had gone back to being a quirk of wood. Cedar Flats smelled fern and honest wet bark. The parallel barefoot tracks had blurred at the edges, rain soft. The 2 prints I had documented on wetboard last night were faint now. The grain remembered pressure if you begged it to. Resource shot tight photos anyway and set a scale card like an apology. The mile marker stood in its half light, the 2 white as a tooth. I clipped my clothespin there out of habit and didn't write now this time because the hour was telling the truth, without me. I gave the post a palm and felt nothing but dawn cold wood. We listened. At 0622, the NOAA bot talked about small craft like it had all week. The The courtesy beep came. The extra click didn't. We stayed another minute. 2. The creak ran like creek. The ground level voice did not try on my cadence or anyone else's. I wrote no ambient voice at MM2 first light, and my hand made the letters smaller than I meant them to. I briefed the crew at the lot. I'm going up the access road to the first switchback. I want a high angle on the stripe. I'll carry smoke and the IR. If you've got eyes from the kiosk, watch the twine line we'll throw across the threshold. Call time if it moves. I set a short length of twine between the kiosk footing and the first post at shin height. A single tag on it, PX again because names keep people honest. Copy, Resource said, looking at their camera. Interval 10. We'll print if anything behaves. I took Unit 24 up the short grade and parked on the gravel apron below the firs, the place where in summer we set cones for group hikes. From there, the lot lays out like a diagram. Kiosk, first post, ribbon of boardwalk, the rectangle of gravel with last night's chalk not entirely gone, the creek line beyond. The switchback railing is heavy timber and takes chalk well. I marked my presence the way rangers do when we're alone. 0631, 12 at switchback, overlook of lot, bar 29.67, air 38 degrees, wind calm. I set the bubble level on the rail, center. I set the IR gun at 36 toward the lot and took a casual reading of the air above the stripe path. 39 degrees again, ambient honest. Then I did the thing I had been thinking about since the second night when the cold flowed like creek. I set the smoke pen on the rail, pressed the trigger, and kept my hands out of the stream. The plume rose straight 6 inches, bowed toward the lot at shin height like a person remembering a habit. And then, clean as a decision, ran along an invisible slope that had nothing to do with the true grade, toward kiosk to post 1 as if following chalk, even from here. The plume kinked once where the stripe had kinked by post 1 last night, then straightened. I keyed dispatch. 12 at upper switchback. Observing horizontal flow above lot at knee height, visible by smoke from high. Request resource check PX at threshold. PX is still, came back. Paper. Camera shows nothing but steam from your coffee. Copy. I filmed 10 seconds and counted the beats out loud, so the recorder would agree later on what a second is. The plume kept its river impersonation. Left to right, then a little right to left under the rail, then steady. Numbers in my lap didn't mind. They kept giving me 4, 4, 4. The radio coughed carrier once. Courtesy beep, no extra click. It felt like a room you know, well after furniture has been moved back where it belonged. I stayed until the sun found the far slope and turned the kiosk's plexiglass map into a square of glare. Up here, the glare looked like a small white coin laid on a rectangle. Down at the lot, maintenance waved once like a person on a dock. Resource leaned toward their camera and then toward the phone like they had a message and were choosing when to read it. The line of air, if that's what it was, faded to a suggestion at knee height and then to a guess. The smoke went up like smoke. The IR gun read 39 degrees in the stripe path, 39 degrees off. Numbers that had been faithful stood down. I drove back down slowly because brakes are honest, and because a raven flew the switchback at shoulder height, and I didn't want to turn it into a story about wildlife. At the lot, the talc fog at the kiosk footing had merged with ordinary dust. PX hung exactly where I'd tied it. Resource handed me a single print from the kiosk camera, taken at 0615, the smoke pen stream at shin height, leaning toward Cedar Flats, knee height returning, my own legs in the lower left corner, mundane as fence posts. We got the counterflow clean, they said. The rest is just mourning. We walked the boardwalk to the bend and watched the creek settle into its daytime voice. The lightning scar cedar did not perform. The rail took my palm and gave me wood, and the particular relief of wood not pretending to be water. The mile marker said 2 in the way a numeral says a fact and refuses to accommodate the rest of your thoughts. On the way back, the first families of the day arrived. Sleep in their faces, coffee in their hands, a laminated map flapping against a child's knee. A man asked if there were bears today, and I told him the truth were allowed. Not right here, not recently, keep your food locked. And a woman asked if the boardwalk loop was stroller-friendly, and I said, mostly, and pointed at the narrow spot where the rail bows. The Ford dog put its chin on the Volvo's windowsill and watched the playground of our rules. I took the last measurement I had promised myself I'd take. Pocket thermometer at the stripe path, ankle height, 41 dirv. Off stripe at same height, 41 dirv. Knee height, both places, 39 dirv. The kiosk hum seemed to prefer daylight. I wrote the numbers anyway, because even when a shape leaves, the page keeps the outline. Dispatch came on with their morning voice. 12 unknown line made one voicemail at 0559. It's 7 seconds of nothing. Silence, no, lock, click. Copy, I said. I didn't ask them to play it. Silence is a thing you can crush by handling. I pulled the permit tag that still said line in my block letters from the kiosk glass and held it for a second longer than needed. Then I set it on the map under the plexi so it would live with the ink until the rain erased the pencil in my notebook and the chalk in the lot and the talc in the gravel. Maintenance took down my short run of twine at the boardwalk with a care that amounted to respect. Resource wrote deliverables on their clipboard and underlined it once, which is their way of not making more of a thing than we're supposed to. I closed the second notebook with the clothespin across the last page to keep it from turning itself. On the inside back cover, I made a list not meant for the incident log, just for the hand that will find this book in a drawer. 4 degrees at night, striped kiosk. Post 1, moves, bifurcates, behaves like shallow water. Boardwalk delayed footfall, inconsistent, marked rails. Overlook deck, palm dark once, rail cooled like creek. Camera showed me out of time once, IR bloom with wrinkle, cross-scene impression maybe, watch said otherwise. Mile marker voice used my sentences and learned manners. Day refused it. Repeaters polite all week, then less so, then polite again. Map held, night shortened, morning made the map right. Do not name it, draw it. As we stood ready to clear, the sun reached the creek and turned a reach of riffle into a sheet of ask, bright as a sign. The raven landed on the switchback rail above and laughed once more, because it could. I keyed dispatch to clear, and the courtesy beep came with no echo, just the one sound it owes. I looked at the lot one last time, the kiosk coin of glare, the straight run to post 1, the clean rectangle of gravel with nothing in it to call a shape, and I let the map decide what the morning was. It decided we had a loop, a spur, a creek, and a day. Half a mile down, the repeater performed its closing trick, and didn't borrow my voice at all. The after-hours phone did not light. The wheel hummed its workman's hum, and the barometer settled into falling until the next front finds it. At the yard, I signed Unit 24 back in, wrote stripe study, inconclusive, see notes, further work, smoke pen IR on windless nights, request portable thermal camera if budget, and put the notebooks in the drawer with the 2 locks. The drawer answered with its little sound like a padlock far away on a phone line, or like a lock nearby doing what locks do at the start of a day, close. I left one permit tag under the plexi at the kiosk when we returned for a last look, because I wanted it there for whoever opens the map to teach a class or to find the trail to Cedar Flats after lunch. It reads, Ranger here, in letters big enough to be seen, and if you stand at the right angle on the first switchback, you can make out the word through the glass when the sun hits it. A red little flag where a person could decide to stand. That's all the ending I can afford. The lot will hold its shape until dusk. The line will be where it is when it wants to be there. We'll draw it again when it lets us, and we will pretend we don't already know how it might go. The map, for now, is enough.